ladies and gentlemen of all ages, boys and girls. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Angry Meat Production. We appreciate you coming in and letting us be a part of your lives week in and week out. We hope to do our best to present you with something that your eardrums delight in. Whether you're looking at us on YouTube or Rumble, or listening to us on Spotify, Google, or Anchor, or any of the other podcast services that we are currently on or trying to get on. We thank you. And if you don't mind, at the end of every episode, stop by, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If it asks for 5 stars, we'll take 5 stars, even if you don't like us. 5 stars are what it's all about. With that being said, we hope you enjoy our attempt to make our advocation our vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, let the games begin.
Welcome, Angry Fable. Today on What the Hell, we're going to talk with Bryan English. He's a guy I met at Vet Fest last Saturday. This will be on Sunday, like 2 weeks ago. So it was 2 weeks. But he came up with me. He told me about his overcoming of addiction and overcoming suicide. And because of the holiday season, I felt it would be appropriate for everybody to get that knowledge that you can overcome and look for the next day instead of just looking at the moment and how horrible it is right then and there. I mean, I've had horrible days to where that shotgun probably tasted really good, but I decided to just put it out on put it out on the side and just wait on the next day. I almost messed up on that one. But anyways, go ahead. Tell us your story, buddy.
Like you said, my name is Bryan English. I'm a veteran. I served 2 tours in Iraq. My first tour was during the invasion for 12 months. And my second tour was 07 to 08, and it was a 15-month tour. Really, the story kind of begins, when I was a child. I had come to faith, because faith is part of my recovery. I'd come to faith in Christ when I was about 7 years old, and I lived a pretty biblical life, I guess, as a kid. But I saw a lot of legalism in the church, and I saw a lot of hypocrisy in the church. And so as I got older and I got into high school and then into college, I started to walk away from the church. And then I'd always planned on joining the military. While I was in high school, I was in JROTC, and then in college, I was in ROTC, and then 9/11 happened. I actually remember I was sitting in Texas history class at UT Arlington, and one of the people stood up in the back of the room and said, "A plane just flew into the World Trade Center." And so he was listening to it on his earbuds or whatever it was he was wearing. And so the class was immediately dismissed, and I went over to the student center, and just in time to see the second plane hit the second World Trade Center.
Oh, damn.
And I was in uniform, actually. It was one of my ROTC days because I was in ROTC in college. And so I was actually in uniform, and I looked down and I thought to myself, well, we're going to war because 1 plane's an accident, 2 planes is an act of war. And so I kind of got the conviction after that I needed to enlist. And so I enlisted with the intention of being available in the reserves if I was needed, but continue my college career and continue to get a degree and become an officer. But then in July of 2002 is when I went to basic training. And when I came back, I was in college and again for maybe a couple of months. And then we got a warning order that we were going to be part of the invading force. And so I dropped out of college, and we started preparing and training for the mission. That tour was pretty uneventful for me, particularly. It was regimented, we did route security, route recon, different things like that. As I was a military police officer. So we did a lot of combat support roles, convoy support and stuff like that. So not a whole lot what happened on that tour because we didn't have any up armored vehicles. All the up armored vehicles went to active duty. So, but when I came back from that tour, I wasn't adjusting well to the civilian life as far as structure goes, because I had just gone through basic training and then a year-long deployment where everything was really regimented. And I think that's when, I mean, no PTSD at this time, but I think that's where I started to see, looking back now, see signs of, an addictive personality. Because I was at a friend's house, we were having a party, and kind of like a welcome home party, and we were having drinks, and having a good time, and then this kid shows up, and we knew him. I'm 20 at this time, and this kid shows up that I knew from through my brother. They had gone to high school together, and he was affectionately known as Skeletor, because he was super skinny, but he was always bumming alcohol or weed or whatever my friends were doing. He was always bumming it off of them, and so he wanted to hang out with us. So I told him, I was like, that's fine, you can hang out, you're at my friend's house though, so you're going to, if you're going to throw up, if you drink too much and you're going to throw up, you've got two places you can throw up, and that's either in the toilet in the house or in the gutter in the street. You're not going to throw up on his yard or on his sidewalk. So the party was going on and everything was fine. And I'm sitting in the garage talking to my friend. He did upholstery for classic cars, and so he was working on some upholstery. And then one of my other friends comes around the corner and says, hey, Bryan, Skeletor is puking in the yard. And so out of nowhere, I got angry. I got really, really angry. And so I went over and I leaned down real close next to his ear. And I said to him, I told you, I effing told you, what did I tell you? And he said, don't throw up in the yard. And so I said, effing right. I said, you throw up in the toilet or in the street, and you broke that rule. And so I ended up picking the kid up by his neck, and dragging him down to the bottom of the driveway and just threw him into the street. And of course, he was so drunk that he couldn't catch himself. And so he face first into the asphalt. And at the time, at that moment, I was so, at that moment, I was so drunk that I just didn't care at that point. I just saw him as somebody who broke the rules, and he deserved what he got. And the next morning when I woke up, it hit me what I had done and who I had, was becoming. And so I was like, man, clearly I need more structure, and I need more discipline, because I don't want to be that guy. So I went and I re-enlisted to go active duty. And then when I went active duty, I ended up going to Fort Riley, Kansas, with a 977th MP company out there. And we did a lot of training. We went down to Fort Polk to help some other units train up for their deployments to Iraq. And
good old JRTC, huh?
Yeah, good old Fort Polk, JRTC. And we ended up down there right before Katrina hit. And so there's as they got the reports that Katrina was on its way, they debated whether they were going to keep us there and hunker us down and then have us be part of the response, or if they were going to send us back. And they ultimately decided to send us back so that we could refit our supplies, and they were going to give our company a warning order to stand by and be ready to come down to assist in the recovery after Katrina. So as we're flying out, the hurricane is literally behind our plane. We're flying out, we're the last plane out of Nam.
Word. How was that?
Yeah, they and it was, and the pilot, told us that, the hurricane's right behind us. So it's going to be a quick takeoff. And so we did, and we made it back to Kansas. We got the warning order, but we ended up not deploying. But shortly after that, maybe about a few months, I think, after that, we got some intel or warning order that we were going to be preparing to deploy to Iraq on a police transition training. And so we spent about 8 or 9 months, I believe, training up to assist the Iraqis in training them to become better law enforcement. During that time, we conducted a couple of field training exercises that we call FTXs. I'm sure you guys know, but for your listeners. And while we were on this FTX, one of the last ones, I was a sergeant at the time. I was a team leader, and a guy in my squad named Bryan Ritzberg, he came up to me. He was not in my team, but he was in one of the other teams. But for some reason, he felt like he could confide in me. So one night after we got done with our missions, we're standing out by an air conditioner, and I'm having a cigarette, and he's comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Sergeant English, I need to tell you something." I said, "All right, man, what's up?" And he said, "Well, I've been having these dreams. I've been having these dreams that I'm going to die in Iraq." I was like, "Dude, that's not." And I knew in my gut that nobody in my squad, and we called it Marlowe's squad. We were like, nobody, because Sergeant Marlowe was our squad leader. Like, nobody in Marlowe's squad is going to die. I tell you that without any kind of hesitation. I know you're not supposed to say that, but I know in my gut nobody in Marlowe's squad's going to die. And tried to comfort him, and that we had told him we had his back. And he was one of those soldiers that he took a little extra time to come into his own as a soldier, but right there towards the end of training, you could see, he was making progress. He was finally making that progress and turning into that soldier that we all knew he could be. Well, when he went on leave, when we went on that block leave before deployment, he ended up supposedly accidentally dropping an air conditioning unit on his hand while they were installing it at one of his family members' houses. There was rumor and suspicion that he dropped it on his hand on purpose so that he wouldn't deploy. But at the time, in 2007, 2008, they had the facilities where we were going, and because we were going up to Kirkuk Regional Air Base, so it was really built up, by that time. And so, they had the facilities to rehab him, so he deployed anyway. And once his hand was healed, well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. When we got to Kuwait for the last little bit of training before we went into Iraq, there were some personnel issues in our platoon. And so the platoon sergeant and the lieutenant decided that they were going to do some swapping around. And so Ritzberg was moved out of my squad into one of the other squads. And one of their personnel were moved into my squad. I found out later through therapy what I did to try to prevent that from happening. But a lot of what my issue with PTSD and a lot of the things that came up later on was because I didn't remember how much I'd actually fought to keep him. And I'll go into details about that a little later. But he was switched. When he rehabbed, he was a gunner for his squad, and their job was to train the major crimes unit in Kirkuk. And their squad leader was screaming to heaven that he needed barriers, Texas barriers, Jersey barriers, Alaska barriers, which for those of your crowd that may not, or of your audience that may not know, there's different size barriers that are made of like solid cement and rebar, and they help to deflect blasts up and away. And they prevent vehicles, when you set them up correctly, and it's like a serpentine pattern and stuff like that, it makes it very difficult for a vehicle to move quickly into your location if it's a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. And so they didn't have any at this major crimes unit. It was basically a straight shot from the street into the major crimes unit.
Really?
And he had been screaming for months, to logistics to get him Jersey barriers out there immediately, because they're completely a vulnerable target, and being a major crimes unit, like, they're investigating serious crimes, and so they're a hot target. And the Army, in its wisdom, did not allocate the barriers that he needed. And one day, a dump truck, like construction dump truck, vehicle-borne IED came flying in and blew up in the entryway, in the courtyard entryway of the MCU, and screwed up a lot of the people in the squad. Well, Ritzberg was, I think he was, from what I was told, he was like one of the closest ones. Like, his truck was one of the closest ones to the blast. His driver actually, the dash of the Humvee came down and had pinned his legs from the explosion, between the seat and the dash. And Ritzberg course, he was, he could only protect himself so much being the gunner, and he couldn't get down in time before he realized what was going on, and he got pretty messed up. Well, the driver would later recount that he tried to get to Ritzburg and tried to help Ritzburg, but because he was pinned, he couldn't move. He couldn't get him. And so, that's, I'm sure he's, hopefully he's gotten help for some of that, whatever that, caused as far as his PTSD. But one of the other squads in our company was in the area, and they were called to, QRF, which, again, for those who aren't aware of the acronym, it's quick response force. And so they were called to QRF over to that area, and they began to work on him. And, especially Ritzburg, because he was one of the ones that was most injured. And, the people who were inside the MCU, the soldiers inside the MCU that were meeting with the police, they had got their bell rung pretty good, but they came out and they started working on their guys. And then the other squad showed up, and they started, doing first aid and buddy aid. And they were able to get tourniquets put on Ritzburg and get, pressure bandages put on and stuff like that. And they were able to high speed it back to the region, Kirkuk Regional Air Base. I had heard about it when I was in the TALK, which is again, another acronym, Tactical Operations Center. I was in the TALK at the time when the radio call came over the net, and, knew exactly, when they said what team was hit and what squad was hit, I knew, exactly who it was. And I ran out to where the medical facility that we had there at Kirkuk, and was basically trying to conduct traffic control to get everybody out of the way, so that when the squad came in, they could come in straight without any kind of, blockage. And so when they came in, they came flying in, immediately got Ritzburg into the OR. And I'm, at this point, like I'm seriously concerned, because the way they had to take him in, and I'm standing outside the OR in the hallway, and every time they'd open the door, I'm seeing them working on him, just trying to keep his blood pressure up, trying to get him blood. And they actually put out an all call for the entire base, that for blood, because they knew they were going to need a lot of blood for him. And it was both angering, sad, and beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, because everybody in that base that was not, on mission or, on duty, everybody showed up. They surrounded the medical center, I think, a couple of times with their line. Like, it was just, I couldn't donate because I'm O positive, and he was, I believe, A positive. So I wasn't able to donate. So that kind of, messed with me a little bit, but it was moving to see that, for sure. Well, the doctor was able to get him stabilized, and they got a medevac, and they got him loaded into the Black Hawk, and they were going to try to get him down to Balad for further treatment. And so, we stood by as he was being rolled out. We saw him, rolled out. We were standing on either side of him as he was getting on the, they were loading him on the chopper. And then we all went and went to the gym and just kind of stood by, just waiting to hear a word as to what happened. And finally, later that night, our commander came in and said that Ritzburg had passed on the way to Balad. And I had never, I thought that, the rage that I felt whenever I had thrown that kid in the street was a lot. I can't even describe the amount of rage I felt when I heard that news, as well as guilt when I heard that news, because in that moment when he said that Ritzburg passed, I remember what I said to him at the FTX. And while technically it was true that nobody in Marlowe's squad died, that didn't help him any, because he had been switched out of the squad. And so while technically my gut was right, I still felt like crap, and I was angry, and I felt guilty, and that I couldn't help him. And in fact, some of the other team leaders and I ended up leaving the gym going to one of the bunkers outside the gym, sitting down having cigarettes. And I actually remember looking at one of the guys that I was with and saying, all I want to do right now is get, as much ammo as I can, and just load it on my vest as much as possible, get two M249 saws and just lay waste to everybody and anybody I see outside the wire. It doesn't matter at this point. Because in my mind at that time, I was so angry, because how do you create a dump truck VBID and nobody know? Somebody in that town knew and didn't say anything. Somebody in that town, because it was a local dump truck. It wasn't something that came from out of town. It was one of the ones that was local to that area. So some people knew, and nobody came forward and said anything. So I was angry at the end, but I didn't do it. I wanted to, but I didn't.
Yeah, we'd be having a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in workout gear right now, that's for sure. But yeah, so I stuffed it down, the guilt and the anger, and all of that, and completed the tour. We ended up getting extended because the Army forgot we were in country. Big surprise there.
That never happens.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was funny.
Did they at least give you hot A's before the bad news?
No, I don't think anybody. I don't think anybody was it wasn't something that was really expected, because we had, in 6 months, we had completed the entire mission that they had given us. Like, we had checked off every box. The IPs were, at the level where they were just needing general supervision and not any more training. And so our commander had called at branch and asked, hey, is there any way we can get our relief early since we've completed our mission? And they're like, who are you? We're like 977th MPs out of Fort Riley, Kansas. And they're like, we don't have a record of you being in country. So not only are you not going to be, not only are so Ritzberg died, and they don't have a record of him of us being in country. So that was a very kind of upsetting in and of
You're
itself.
a ghost. That you're like the super secret organization.
Right. Yeah. Talk about some plausible deniability. Right?
Yeah.
So but yeah, so they said, not only are you not coming home early, but we're going to give you the mission that would have been the follow-on mission, and then we're going to stand up a unit out of Germany, and they're going to come relieve you in about 8 months. So your 12-month tour is turned into a 15-month tour when your mission was accomplished in 6 months. So yeah, that was fun.
That is the personification of the old adage. And I know you and I were both Army, so yeah, you do a good job and you do it well enough that you're going to get somebody else's job.
Yep. They're going to add it to yours. Not that you're going to move jobs. They're just going to add that job to your job that you're already.
You remember they used to tell us, like, there's no individuality in the military, but the higher ups always look at you and be like, hey, you.
Yeah, you're the guy.
Hey, you, come here. You're that guy. Come here.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely. But so towards the end of that deployment, things had kind of settled down. We had gotten, the lay of the land. We had our informants, and we had, we were gathering intel and arresting IPs and arresting Iraqi Army people that were part of the insurgency and whatnot. So things had kind of settled down in our region. And I remember reading a book. I want to say it was called Dominion. It's a Christian fiction novel about spiritual warfare. And in the book, again, at this time in my life, I'm not really a practicing Christian, but I'm starting to feel a pull back to God during this deployment, with all the stress and everything that was going on. And in the book, it talks about how our fight is not with flesh and blood, but the principalities and spiritual fight. And I decided, one of the other things I saw during that deployment was we got called out to a murder in one of the towns in the Rashad Valley. That's where our IPs were stationed, was in Rashad Valley. And we went to one of those towns, and it was a beheading. The report that we got was that there had been 5 murderers in this town, and that the bodies were piled in the town square. So we responded with the IPs, but given the chance for booby traps and whatnot, the squad leader, had a up armored Humvee, because I was in an ASV. For those who don't know what an ASV, it's armored security vehicle. It's a a four-wheeled vehicle that has like angular designs. It's like a precursor to the MRAP, but it's
Okay.
more. It looks more like what was those vehicles the infantry used?
Strikers.
Yeah, it looked a lot more like a striker than it did an MRAP, but it was four wheels. We had Mark 19 50 cal on it, and then your 240 Bravo sat on a mount just outside the hatch as a tertiary weapon if needed. But anyway, so I was a team leader for one of those trucks, and so he took one of the Humvees. Well, I guess the smell was so bad that one of the guys in the truck wasn't able to continue circling the bodies, and so he sent the truck. The squad leader came back with the truck and then had me dismount and go with him. I couldn't smell anything. I've never been able to smell a dead body. I count that as a blessing because I've heard stories
Yeah,
from people.
yeah. You.
It's pretty bad.
Me and me and another guy was talking about that because I've had a couple of dead bodies that I had deal with, one with corrections and another doing mortuary, and I can smell roadkill from a mile away, and I can smell burnt flesh from even farther. But it's just one of those smells that your brain just picks up automatically, and it sucks.
Yeah.
And because of how our brain works, to where any kind of sensory happens to you, like smell, sight, sound, or even touch or taste, you you get a flashback to what it was originally, and then you have to figure out where this is all out. It's an interesting when I was doing research on it at one point in time to where just to figure out my own brain and try to even though scientists can't figure it out, but it's interesting to actually trying to figure out the most elusive machine in our body, the brain.
Yeah. Well, and it's strange because for me, like I said, because everybody I've ever talked to that smelled the dead body, talks about how horrible it is and how intense it is. But even when I was younger, when I came back from my first tour, my aunt had a seizure and she ended up dying in her apartment, and she'd been in her apartment for a couple of days before anybody realized that she hadn't said anything to anybody, and which was not uncommon for her for a couple of days not to reach out. But then after a couple of days, she would, somebody would reach out to her, she would reach out to somebody else. And so we couldn't get a hold of her. And I remember going inside the apartment as they were kind of wheeling. I was kind of moving things around so that the paramedics could wheel her out on the gurney. I couldn't smell anything, but they were talking about the smell, and I couldn't smell it. And then, of course, with the 5 dead bodies, we were driving around in a circle around the where the bodies were, looking for lines, wires, and booby traps, and again, couldn't smell a thing. And I don't know what it is about my brain. Maybe that part never developed in my olfactory.
It might have been because with your first experience with it, I mean, your aunt. So maybe your brain was just like, I don't want to associate that with her.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Some people just have it to where like me, I have extra sensory. I can smell better than most people. I used to be able to see better, but age fucks that up. But I can touch something. I can I was describing the lettering on a envelope and everything, and someone was flipping out, and taste buds and everything was it's a strange concept to hear that someone can't understand that.
And I thought that maybe, after that, I mean, with those bodies, what ended up happening with them was not many people realize this, but in Iraq, it's not just, Muslims and Christians that are, in the Middle East, but there are sects within, Islam that are satanic, that actually vow their allegiance to who they call shaitan, which is, the same thing in the Christian and Jewish world as Satan. And so this tribe, what's that?
And jinns.
Yeah,
And
gins as
a lot
well.
of people associate genies as American style or European. The genies, they associate that with Make a Wish. You get it, but in Aramaic theology, they were ephets also. They're basically they're darker halves, and they grant your wish, but it also costs you a lot.
Yeah, it's we're not talking about Aladdin's genie.
Oh no, the difference is night and day, really.
Oh, for sure. They're definitely evil creatures according to the Islamic tradition. But so this tribe, they were a satanic tribe, and what happened was one of their daughters had fallen in love with one of the men in this Muslim tribe. And so she left that tribe, like she ran away from them and married this man in this village that was Muslim. And so the satanic tribe came over to the town and killed the men of the family and beheaded them and piled their bodies in the middle of the town
Oh
square.
shit!
Yeah, and left a DVD tape to one of the light poles in the town. It was like one of those wooden light poles, and it was taped to it, and it was the video of them beheading the men in the night.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So yeah, so that was something that always kind of stuck with me throughout. Like I said, towards the end of the tour, having seen that, having experienced Ritzberg's death, and seeing the state that he came in whenever I was at the hospital, watching them roll him in and watching the OR from the hallway because the doors would just swing wide open. I was like, man, I'm tired. This is my second tour, but my first tour I didn't see a whole lot of death. We had some mortars and stuff, but nobody died. Nobody, the worst thing that happened was some guys ran over a cluster bomb from the Desert Storm and rung their bells, but they didn't get hurt other than maybe some TBI, but they weren't physically injured on the outside. Obviously TBI is a physical injury, but
Yeah.
but anyway, I decided I didn't want to fight wars anymore. I wanted to be a police officer as a civilian. I wanted to help people. I didn't want to, live, going from deployment to deployment and fighting the, wars like that. So I decided to get out, and I ended up becoming a cop in California for the Army. My wife at the time, when I got out of the Army, this is my first wife. She joined the Air Force, and we were stationed in Monterey, California.
So she made the right move.
Right. Yeah. And she joined the Air Force, and we were stationed in Monterey, California for a couple of years. And I joined the Presidio of Monterey Police Department, which is a Army police department, but it's all civilians. And it's, you have part of your property is the Presidio of Monterey, which is closed property. That's where all the students go, where they do like their, different training and what. It's a training environment. And then the other part, which is what used to be Fort Ord out in California, but now it's called Ord Milcom, Ord Military Community. And it's open property. So there's no gates, there's no anything like that. It's just, housing for the students and family and cadre that are at Presidio. There's a PX and a couple other things, but it's pretty much just open property. Anybody can travel through freely. So, and then on top of that, they had part of the property had been leased out to CSUMB, California State University of Monterey Bay. So we had a lot of stuff going on there, more than just MP stuff. Like we were dealing with gangs, drugs, prostitution, college parties, all sorts of craziness while we were there. And one of the things that really should have woken me up or really should have gotten my attention is that one night, my first wife and I were at a house party with one of her friends, and they were both, her and her friend were both Air Force, and her friend's husband was a civilian like me, and so we were just doing shots. We had tequila shots, and I'd already put down, I don't know, 8 or 9 beers at this point, and he wanted me to go shot for shot with tequila, and he lined up.
That's not a good plan.
No, he's lined up 6 shots each. And he challenged me to go shot for shot. I remember taking 2 shots. Apparently I took all 6, but I only remember taking 2. Because so, and then what I remember after that is bits and pieces. It's shoddy, it's shoddy memory after that. I remember.
Yeah. What's really funny is I keep on asking people that it's like they get so blank out drunk. I was like, "Did you have fun?" I was like, "Yeah, it was a fun time." How is it a fun time if you can't remember it though?
How do you know?
How do you know this? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, it's like
I had a
you
fun
wake up the
time, but
next day, you wake up the next day or maybe the day after, and you got and you're having to be told via third person point of view your escapades, and it's like there's no way I did that, like at all. And then the story's corroborated by like 4 or 5 other people, and you're like,
Or worse yet, video.
oh yeah,
right.
video.
Well, see, I was in before we had cell phones. So, it's one of those, thank God,
Yeah.
because that stuff, I mean, with the exception of the occasional Article 15,
Yeah.
there's no record
Sure.
of the debauchery.
Yeah, that was my
So,
experience while I was on active duty. I got, I did stupid stuff when I was on active duty. Everybody does. But
Yeah.
especially the enlisted. But
No idea.
guilty.
Yeah.
But at this point, this is about 2008, I think, is when this happened. I'd gotten out of the Army, met up with her in California at this house party, and so I did the shot for shot. I remember taking 2, and then apparently I took all 6. And then what I remember was actually being carried like by 2 people under my each arm, and like I'm being drugged, as I'm screaming out to my wife's car, and I'm screaming Ritzberg's name. And I'm screaming, it should have been me. It shouldn't have been him. He shouldn't have died. He's a better person than I am. And I, he was a very genuinely good, person. His soldiering instinct was what we had to develop, because he was such a empathetic and sympathetic person. We had to kind of train him to be a little more aggressive than what he naturally was. And
well,
so,
sometimes that's the best kind of soldier to have, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but he,
I mean, it goes with that mindset of, break them down and rebuild them kind of a thing. And he's got this new skill set that he had.
yeah,
So, but yeah, that thought just jumped into my head. Sorry, I
yeah,
didn't
no,
mean to interrupt
absolutely,
you.
no, you're good, absolutely. I mean, most of us, a lot of us, we get that change whenever we go to basic training. Like we get that breakdown and build up into that killer instinct when we go to basic training. Somehow, he was able to maintain that, part of him even through basic training. And but like I said, during the FTX and stuff like that, he started to come into his own. But so I was screaming about Ritzberg and how it should have been me and it shouldn't have been him and all that. And I remember being put in the car and just screaming into the window, like she's driving and the window is right here, and I'm just screaming, to all of creation. Like the window is up, but I'm screaming like I'm screaming out into all creation that it should have been me. And we get
Ears
home.
bleeding after that?
What's that?
Was there ears bleeding after that? I can just
I
imagine.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't think so, but there's a
Well,
lot.
see, the thing about it is, Dave, is that like when you get that hammered, that pissed, right? The volume control in our heads goes a little sideways.
Yeah, I gather that.
But I know on the several occasions, depending on what I'd been drinking, I'm either just completely chilled out or I get mad as a hornet and I want to fight the world, and it's for dumb reasons, and it's like you look at everything that you think that should have gone right as being your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, like, I don't know if you would call it an empathetic streak or whatever, but I think that, because like we like, I don't know, we inject ourselves into that other person's role. And
or
I
based on the
think,
situation.
Yeah, and I think, like, they say alcohol removes your inhibitions. I think part of that inhibition is letting that wall down that we put up
Removes it removes that
as war
safeguard that we
fighters.
put in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it alcohol is nothing more than a skeleton key for the closet that we keep our demons in. So yeah,
I
I
like
get
that,
it.
and that's solid. Yeah, that's actually a very apt description of what it was doing for me. And I get home and I somehow I stumble my way in because my wife at the time, she wouldn't have been able to carry me. So I found my way into the house, and from what I can remember, I think was bouncing off the walls as I was moving down the hallway and got into bed, uh, immediately passed out just to wake up. I don't know how soon after that, but I mean, I'm going exorcist all over the room, just spewing everything that I had had that day everywhere, and then just laying back down in my own vomit. Not even thinking about it, not even caring, just laying
Yeah.
back. It's just all over me. It's all over the bed. You know, the wife at the time, she went and got towels. Apparently, she told me about this later, and she cleaned it up as best she could. But there was only so much she could do with me, being dead weight. She couldn't do a whole lot. And so the next morning, she told me about what happened, and apparently this is how I know I completed all 6 shots, because she told me I completed all 6 shots. And she said, after the 6th shot, I walked over to their kitchen table, sat down, and just stared off, into the distance, like just that 1,000-yard stare, just not engaging with anybody, not talking with anybody, just staring. And then I just started crying and then started yelling. And that's when they decided it was time for me to go. So that should have been my first clue that I was dealing with something. But I would look at the stuff that I saw, right? And it was, Ritzburg, and then those bodies and stuff like that. And I would compare myself, I would compare my trauma to the other trauma that I knew other people had gone through, people who had, suffered injury, people who had been, amputated, or, their buddy had died in their arms, all these different things, that people in my unit and other units that I had heard. And I was like, how can I possibly not deal with this? How can I possibly go and get help and not be, those guys that are just faking the funk in the VA system, because we know those guys in the VA that are, they're lying through their teeth just to get disability ratings, just so they can get free money from the government. And there's lots of them that do it. Kind of further on down the story, but I was a police officer for the VA. I would hear them all the time, telling each other in, the cafes and in the waiting areas, like how to game the system. They were teaching each other how to game the system so that they could get more disability than what they actually, did. So I didn't want to be that guy. And so I refused to get help. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop drinking. Clearly, and my time in service don't get along. So I'm just going to stop drinking. And I did for about 6 months. I would just quit cold turkey, never looked back at it, and then started drinking again off and on. Was maintaining just fine for years, till we got to Georgia. She got stationed to Georgia. We moved to Georgia. A lot of stuff happened there. I started dealing with suicidal ideation during my time there in Georgia, but I would just stuff it down, just push it down. The closest I came to suicide in Georgia was there was a night, I think she was working a night shift, and I was in the house by myself, and I had my pistol, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed with the pistol locked and loaded, and I was just staring at the pistol. Like I could just end all this now. I didn't. For whatever reason, I think I just got tired. I just felt exhausted. So I decided to put the gun away and go to sleep. And, looking back, I think that was God making me fall asleep. But I did. I fell asleep. And then when I woke up the next morning, I was able to stuff all those emotions back down. Well, things happened with her and I. There was infidelity on both sides. And so we ended up splitting. I ended up coming back to Texas, to DFW. I was born in McAllen, Texas, and raised in Arlington. So I came back to Arlington with my kids. Her plan was that she was going to get out of the Air Force, and her boyfriend and her were going to come back to Texas, and we're going to do the divorce and everything was going to be fine. Well, I ended up while I was here, I ended up meeting another woman that started dating her, and everything was going great, man. I mean, I had a great career. I had become, I'd start when I transferred from California to Georgia. I had become a police officer for the VA there. I ended up getting promoted to sergeant. I was an instructor. And then when I transferred to Dallas, I had to take a demotion back to patrol. But within a couple of years, I was the training lieutenant. And then shortly after that, some time after that, I became a detective, lieutenant detective for them. I did a lateral transfer out of training into investigations. And so from all intents and purposes, from every viewpoint on the outside, I had the American dream. Like I had the life. I had a 4-bedroom house in Saginaw, Texas, that we were converting the office into a 5th bedroom. I had a motorcycle. We had 2 cars. We had tons of friends. We had all the latest, and greatest stuff. I had 4 kids from my first marriage. My second wife was pregnant. Everything was, looking as though this dude has a perfect life. Like he has the American dream. Beautiful house, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, just a beautiful life. But this entire time, I'm not telling anybody. I'm not talking to anybody about my stress, my struggles, because I'm trying to be stronger than that. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be vulnerable and weak and say that this stuff that I experienced in Iraq affected me more than I was willing to admit. And I kept telling myself, and I kept comparing myself to, man, there's other people who have experienced so much worse, so much more. How can I say that this is something that I need to get help for when it pales in comparison to the trauma that, guys that I work with now went through. Like they're guys I'm working with in the department.
Well, the thing is, and I had a talk with a person that came on the podcast about this. Is we as individuals all have like demons, and we see that someone's having a harder time, and our demons aren't that bad, and we should just just walk off with
Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
when
yeah, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
What it comes around to is the fact of the airplane. Okay, airplane's best example you can possibly get because everybody at least at one point in time has been on. I pray someone's talked about it. When you put on the mask, you put on your mask first so you can help that other person. You have to help yourself out first so you can drag that person
absolutely
wherever you go.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah,
you bandage up yourself, then you take care of them unless they're like in a serious condition. I mean, you figure out how to do it 2 at a time.
You triage.
Bryan, there was an ethos that I was taught when I was in the infantry. It's the 3 M's: men, mission, myself. And I've always been the one that has tried to apply that in my regular life, and sometimes that just doesn't work. And when my second marriage was coming to an end, just the little ghosts, the little demons, the little regrets, and the woulda, coulda, shouldas just started creeping in, and the voices just kept getting louder and louder. And my second wife at the time, she had explicitly expressed that she had no interest in trying to learn about or help with that kind of a thing. That didn't help. So I came home one day and from work, and I went in my closet where I kept my gun safe, and I chambered 1 round in my pistol, and I actually had the barrel up to my head. And I hear this voice going, you're not supposed to be here. And then I had this thought, this image coming through my head of my boys walking in, finding me. And I took the gun away from my head. I dropped the magazine. I cleared the chamber, just set it down on the ground, and I just sat there and cried. And she ultimately left. And I eventually, through the church that I was going to at the time, got hooked up with a guy who was an Army chaplain, and then come to find out he was actually a chaplain for the same brigade that I was in.
Wow.
So we spoke the same language, and and he gave me a piece of advice. He gave me actually like a homework assignment, and I tell this to guys all the time. He told me to personify my demons, give them a name, and then write a breakup letter to it. And so, I was like, okay, I can do that. So I sat down with like a very earnest approach, and I named it initially after my first wife. And I was like, no, because I get about a paragraph into it, and I'm like, no, this isn't helping, because all I'm doing is just screaming at her, kind of a thing. So I deleted everything. And then, probably one of my most unoriginal moments, for whatever reason, I'm listening to music while I'm trying to do this. And that Breaking Benjamin song, Dear Agony, came on. And so I was like, oh, crap. So I just named it Agony, and the letter started out, Dear Agony. And 1,300 words later, man, I just kind of felt drained. And I read that letter back to myself. And boy, you want to talk about humbling.
Mm-hmm.
It put me in a position where it forced me to take ownership for my actions. And yeah, while you've got these demons that are there kind of telling you, that you're not good enough, or that you don't need to be here, that everybody would be better off without you. You were the one that ultimately made that conscious, decision to go down that road. And once I was able to take ownership for those actions, take ownership for those thoughts, it was really, for lack of a better term, it was very empowering, and it was very cathartic. And to me, I look back on that day, and I look back on that letter, and that was really a turning point for me. I went from, again, like you said, really God kind of intervening at the very right time. I mean, I'm standing literally on the edge, and I mean, my finger literally was on the trigger, and he pulled me back. And he gave me this kind of like It's a Wonderful Life moment, where I was able to see what the world would have looked like without me in it. And I found myself really kind of looking at it like, here I am, a guy that claims to never want to quit, never want to back down from a fight, willing to take that step that's not only going to remove myself from the fight, but it's going to put my boys at a very serious disadvantage. And so I look back on that letter, and actually probably about a year to a year and a half later, no, 2 years later, I sat down and wrote a letter to my demons again, and not necessarily in the breakup format, but more of a, hey, I'm just checking in to show you how I'm doing.
Right.
And so I mean, when I hear about brothers and sisters that have contemplated that, or are taking steps to go down that road, it's become very much a passion project for me, and I know it's become one for David as well. And so I mean, when I was still living up there in Wichita Falls, I got involved with my American Legion post, and by a very, very outstanding individual, very good friend of mine, named Michael Kurtz, started a rucking, and he was Air Force, so he's like, and I don't do that walking shit, and I mean, and now he's You can see the rain blowing in, starting to fall out here. That's cool. But he's kind of taken off with it. I mean, he started like an actual ruck club up there. They're associated with Go Ruck. They're doing events all over town all the time. They're doing WODs, and I'm just like, bro. I mean, I've created a monster. He's gotten his wife involved. There's other guys from the post involved. There's civilians getting involved, and I'm just like, whoa, you know. And then I get down here. I moved to just south of Houston after I got married to my now wife. We actually have an organization down here called Val 22,
Yep,
and
we have that up here.
yeah, but like the guy that runs it literally lives right behind me.
Yeah, we have a
Like,
Battle
I can-
22 here in Arlington or Fort Worth, I think.
Yeah, so
Was
I
that
mean,
the guy we met down in Vet Fest? Or is that
The guy.
Probably
Talking about me?
different. That was in the truck with.
Oh, I don't know, because I haven't done anything with Battle 22. I just know they're here because some of my friends have used them.
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I mean, it's dude, it's the hearing you go through these progressions and finally getting to the point where you're just like,
I'm not even there yet in the
that-
story because
Yeah.
yeah,
there's
I
still
mean,
much more to go.
I'm sitting here going, holy crap, you know, it's like, because you know, it's you hear this in like marriage counseling or whatever, that while what you may be going through might feel unique, you're not the first person to go through it, kind of a deal. And then that's all I'm hearing in my head right now, and I'm just like sitting there going, okay, all right, I'm broken, but I'm not nearly as damaged as I think I was, you know. So, you know, because it's like I'm not the only one that goes through it. So I mean, I'm done getting off into the weeds now. I'm yielding the floor back to you, sir.
No problem. I appreciate that. I mean, it definitely, you know, it's good to share stuff like that with each other, especially amongst veterans, especially veterans who've whatever the trauma, whether it's combat trauma or military sexual trauma or whatever trauma that they've experienced, being able to just openly share it. Ultimately, that's one of the most cathartic things that a veteran can do. But so at this time, you know, again, we're looking at my life, and my life is just picture perfect, right? You know, from the outside looking in. But during this whole thing, I'm battling my first wife over the custody of my older 4 children. And, you know, that's stressing me out. And I still haven't addressed any of my PTSD, any of my trauma, any of the things I'm dealing with. So I'm getting to a point, you know, I'm again, I mean, nobody at work even realized, nobody at the, you know, in my department even knew. But I would shut my door with my gun on my hip, you know, and I would lock my office, and I would sleep, you know, for hours because I just couldn't, I didn't have energy. I didn't have, you know, the strength to just keep my eyes open. And so I did that a few times, and then I realized, I was like, man, this is stupid. This is dangerous. I'm phoning in my work. Like I'm still doing a good job, but I don't care, as you know, like I should, about, you know, the work that I'm doing. I'm investigating crimes. You know, we're investigating, you know, vehicle thefts. We're investigating catalytic converter thefts. We're investigating domestic violence, prostitution, you know, drugs. I mean, we're investigating a lot of different things. A lot of things happen on VA property that people don't really think would happen on hospital grounds. But because the Dallas campus of the VA is in Oak Cliff. It's not in the nice side of Oak Cliff either. It's in the more rough neighborhood of Oak Cliff, Dallas.
Yeah,
And
so it's is it the one that's over there off of Harry Hines?
top of Lancaster.
Okay, yeah, I know what facility you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's the main hospital, and that's where I did most of my work. But I mean, as a detective, I had all the VA property. All the VA owned property was under my jurisdiction with my criminal investigator. He was my supervisor. But you know, we're investigating all these things, but I'm finding myself less and less, invested in the job. I mean, this is a job that I've wanted since I was in second grade. Like I wanted to be a cop. When my teacher in second grade asked, draw a picture of yourself, what you want to be when you grow up, I drew myself in police uniform next to a police car. That was always my dream. So, I mean, I have my dream job, but I'm not finding any fulfillment, any satisfaction in it.
You're pretty much being compliant to the job.
Yeah, I'm doing the bare minimum, which, for government work is,
That's
excess.
a lot.
Yeah. That's, when it comes to government jobs, if you can do what they ask you, you're doing a pretty dang good job. But I was used to doing more, right? I was never someone who just did the bare minimum. I always went the extra mile, always tried to make every case the most important case, every interview the most important interview. And I wasn't doing that anymore. And then of course, on top of that, sleeping with a gun on my hip, I was like, man, I can't be doing this. I'm not safe. I don't care. I need to resign. I need to retire because I'm not. So I retired early under LEOSA, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act. So I don't get like a pension necessarily, but I still have my retirement, with them, but I can't touch it until I'm like 65 or whatever it is. But I'm retired detective from there now. So but what we did was my second wife at the time, I started telling her about what was going on at work a little bit. And she was like, well, why don't you just, this is right around the time the pandemic started hitting pretty hard. She's like, well, why don't you just, resign and you can be a stay-at-home dad? And she was making six figures at the time. So it wasn't like it was going to hurt us in the pocketbook. It's like, you can take care of the kids and teach the kids because she was working from home. He's like, we can just be a family at home and you take care of the house and the kids and I'll, do the work and, we'll just have a great life. And you don't have to worry about, chasing people or, investigating or anything like that. And I was like, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So that's what I did was I resigned and actually tried to become a mortgage loan processor with the same company that she was working for. They had a program for veterans and college grads where they would teach you how to process loans. So real quick, just to recap of all the years that have gone between, we're talking about 13 years where I've continuously struggled with self-worth, with suicidal ideation. I'm constantly battling these demons when I'm going to sleep. I'm having nightmares. I'm having night terrors to the point where she's having to wake me up in the middle of the night because I'm yelling and screaming. And these dreams, these nightmares and night terrors that I'm having, it's not even like anything specific that gets personified. It's either I'm being chased by something or I'm chasing something trying to kill it. And so, but I'm screaming in my sleep, but it's not coming out as like a full scream. It's like a whisper scream, is what she described, kind of the way she described it. But she would have to wake me up just so that she could go to sleep because I kept waking her up. But again, all these things, the suicidal ideation, the self-worth issue, the praying to God to just take me and just kill me now, just relieve me from all this pain. And then these nightmares and night terrors that I'm struggling with. So all should have been clues, right?
You didn't take those clues at all, right?
Right. No, as good a detective as I was, which I was pretty darn good, I could not investigate myself. I
was just about to say all of that training just went right out the window.
Yeah. And I was just too close to it. Right. And that's a lot of what happens to us as veterans is that we're just too close to it to really see it for what it is. And so that's what was going on. And so while I was training up for this loan processing job, I was doing really well. I was like the head of my class, just killing it with the how to understand the programs and all the different things that we were doing. And then when they sent us out to start actually processing loans, like I was surpassing all my peers in processing loans. But again, I'm putting all this pressure on myself more than I probably should have to be as good as people who had been doing it for 10, 15 years. Like I'm trying to be, within having done this for a year and I'm trying to match their numbers. And I'm just breaking my back, mentally trying to get this stuff done to the point where I'm having, emotional breaks, where I'm just underneath my desk at home, just sobbing.
Because I'm basically having regular panic attacks.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And so, every weekend at this point, I'm drinking probably a, fifth of vodka or a fifth of tequila or a fifth of whiskey through the course of Friday night till Sunday evening when I'm going to bed. I'm going through one, if not two, handles of that stuff, but I kept it on the weekends. So I was like, I don't have a problem. I'm just partying with my friends. And then, but with all these emotional breakdowns I was having, my wife at the time took pity on me, and she's like, you don't need to work at all. You can just be a stay-at-home. She thought thought that was going to help me, because then I won't have stress. I won't have all the external stressors stressing me out. And her heart was a heart of compassion for me in that moment, and just said, look, I can pay the bills, and you can do what you need to do, and just take care of the family and take care of the home. And so that's what I did. Problem was, I still hadn't addressed my demons. I still hadn't addressed my PTSD and my trauma. And so now, whereas, when I was working as a cop and then working as a loan processor, during the day, I had things to occupy my mind, even though they were stressful. It kept me away from drinking because I needed to be sober minded to be able to handle these things. And so that was my motivation not to drink.
Basically,
Now,
you don't get any hobbies.
yeah.
That's one thing that cured me on a lot of my stuff is the basic fact is I love creating and love doing hobbies and everything like that.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that actually helps you out a lot. I mean,
it's a replacement strategy.
Rucking. Yeah, it's Johnny with his rucking. I mean, what hobbies do you do now?
Well, now I do work out a lot because I want to be physically healthy, because I look like trash when I was in the middle of my addiction. Oh man, I was trying to grow my hair out, and I look like a homeless person, even though I wasn't. But so I do a lot of working out, and then I do. I'm working on stuff on YouTube. Create my own channel on YouTube.
Everything I ended up like, it's like, you got a challenge for me? Give it to me. I'm like, dude, you're at 11. I need you to take to like a 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's something that I do right now to kind of occupy my time, is I work on my YouTube channel and try to keep in that, and it's going pretty well, because there's a lot of research involved in it, and so it keeps that's pretty good as far as my day-to-day goes. But I'm also going to be trying to get with Voc Rehab to see about getting some retraining. I haven't decided. Like, it's funny. At first, I thought about going into IT and becoming a cybersecurity specialist, but recently, I felt like it's been a thought in my head, and I'm not sure, because I'm very wary about going into the ministry, but because of people in the ministry are held to a higher standard, and I don't want to be like those guys you see that are leaders in the ministry and turn around and screw everything up, and then people fall away from the faith because of it. So I've always been told ever since I was a kid that I was going to be either an evangelist or a preacher, but I never wanted it because I didn't want to be held to that standard. I was like, I can't meet that standard. There's no way. So, but recently that's been something that's been weighing on me. So I'm praying about it, and I'm talking to people about it as to whether or not that's something that I'm being called to, or if that's just a distraction. So, but that's besides the point at the moment.
Yeah.
I
told you we're gonna get off bases a lot.
Yeah, no, you're good. But so at the
meanwhile, we've got an uninvited guest here.
Oh, it's all right. He's a cute little puppy. But
she is rotten.
All right.
Yeah, you're good. So I ended up quitting that job and became a stay-at-home dad. My demons were still there, and I'm struggling even more with suicidal ideation and sense of worthlessness. So I started self-medicating throughout the week with tequila, because tequila is basically odorless. I could cover up the smell on my breath with vaping or smoking or gum or whatever, because it wasn't too pungent. And so I was able to hide it pretty easily, and I would hide the handle. I would go out and buy a handle at a time, and I would hide it in the garage, and I would take, a shot or two every couple of hours.
A handle?
The big 750, huge.
Oh, okay.
They literally have a handle on them.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, What was he talking about?
The jars,
See,
the
okay,
bottles
see,
that are so
right,
big.
that's the lightweight Air Force talking.
No, that's just I'm not that I'm not up at that level of alcoholism.
But yeah, so but it got to a point. I mean, I got so to the point, like, so she caught me a couple of times drinking during the day and drinking during the week and being drunk, and would give me an ultimatum, knock it off, whatever, this, that, and the other. And I would, she kicked me out at one point, and I started going to AA. Wasn't really jiving, honestly, with AA. I don't think I was in a place at that time for it to really be effective. Plus, I didn't really, to me, this higher power stuff. Just I constantly felt the pull of God, and I constantly felt His presence in my life, but I just didn't want anything to do with it. I would try from time to time to read the Bible to my kids, and and I had a bunch of theology, a bunch of knowledge, still do. I can debate till the cows come home on lots of different issues, but I didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't care. I just, it was more of an intellectual exercise than a spiritual exercise for me. And so I kept drinking. I'd go to AA for a while. Now this is where I think she didn't help me where she should have. I believe her heart was in the right place, but she just didn't know how much damage this actually did. But she would say, I don't really think you're an alcoholic. I think you just need to learn how to control it. Because she liked to go and drink and go to karaoke bars and stuff, and she didn't want to be the only one drinking. If she was going to drink, she wanted me to drink with her. She could just share that celebratory time, not realizing that I no longer had the capability of maintaining just a celebratory time. That part of me, it was gone at that point. So one time I'd stopped going to AA because there was a lot of stress at home with her having to deal with the kids while I was in my meetings. I was going to meetings like 2 or 3 times a week, and so she was dealing with a lot of that. And then I ended up stopped going. We ended up at a restaurant one night, Papados, over in the Saginaw area, and we're standing there waiting for food to go. And again, middle of the pandemic, so we're just kind of, it was not middle of the pandemic, it's closer towards the end where things were kind of loosening up because we were inside the restaurant, and we're picking up the food, but where we pick the food up is right there in the bar area. And I'm struggling because I haven't been to AA in a while, but I had stopped drinking at this point, period. But she looked at me and she goes, well, why don't we get a drink? And you don't ask an alcoholic, why don't we get a drink while we're standing in the middle of a bar? Because he's going to say,
It's like
okay.
it's like, hey, what are you going to drink? A holic. That's what I'm going to drink.
Yeah. So I just, okay. And she's like, as long as you drink with me, and as long as you only drink with me and you don't drink without me, then I think, you can do this.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I was like, absolutely. In my mind, I'm like, yeah. And I fully intended only to drink with her, but
That's like having a spotter in the gym.
But yeah, so it's just, and that was, I didn't intend to get back into drinking behind her back, but I did. We ended up selling the house in Saginaw during the height of, profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And we made, I don't know, like 90 grand off of our house on top of paying back the mortgage. And so we ended up moving over into Crowley, to an apartment complex in Crowley. Still stay-at-home dad. Things seem, from her perspective and from everybody else's perspective, seem to be going well. She had a relationship with her half-brother now, because they had been estranged since birth. They hadn't met each other. They met each other in Saginaw through online community, like on Facebook and stuff. So he moved into the apartment complex, into an apartment down, a floor below us. So everything is going great. We're looking into buying another house, a nicer house. It's an older house, but a nicer house in Fort Worth, and using the money that we had made from the sale in Saginaw. And she goes out. Mind you, I've been kicked out, I think, at least a couple of times at this point, and got to this point where I'm not going to AA. I still haven't addressed my demons. I still haven't addressed my PTSD, but she's allowing me to drink. And this particular apartment complex, one of their show apartments, they left unlocked during the day to show the apartment, without having to use a key. Well, inside that fridge, they had waters, sodas, and beers. And they would offer beer to people whenever they were doing the apartment tours. I knew it was left unlocked, and so this particular day, she had taken her daughter and my daughter out for a girls' day, and me and my boys were going to be in the house watching movies, just having a guys' day in the apartment. Well, we had some alcohol left over from the night before, where we had been drinking with her brother on the patio and of our apartment. And so when I woke up that morning, we already had the plan that she was going to go do that. I woke up before her. I immediately went over to the fridge, had this huge tumbler, and I just poured all the beers that I could into that tumbler, and I just hit it behind, next to the couch. And me and my sons are watching a movie. I think it was what's that Chris Pratt movie, Future War?
Oh
yeah, the Tomorrow War. Yeah,
Tomorrow War. Yeah, so we're watching the Tomorrow War, and then she gets up, gets the girls together, and they go out to do the girl day. And I'm at this point with that tumbler, I've probably had about 4 beers, the equivalent to 4 beers by the time she leaves. And she leaves, and I go and refill from the fridge what we had left. And so I'm drinking that, and I finish all that up. And I was like, well, I'm too drunk to drive. I'm not going to do that. But the apartment downstairs, I know, has alcohol, and it's open, and it's free.
Yeah.
So I tell the boys I'll be right back. I go downstairs to that apartment, go in there, and I grab, I don't know, 7 or 8 beers out of the fridge, take them upstairs to my apartment, and I fill the cup up. And I'm drinking, there's a few in the fridge, and I'm drinking it. And I'm about halfway through that tumbler when I lost all track of time at this point, because I'm pretty drunk at this point, because I hadn't been drinking for a while. And so, my tolerance was low. And so I'm pretty drunk at this point. And she comes home, and I'm like passed out on the couch. And the Tomorrow War's blaring, loud as hell. She can hear it out in the hallway. And she comes in, she goes, why is the movie so loud? And I'm like, oh, what? Coming out of my slumber. She goes, in the hallway now. And I get up and I stumble out in the hallway. And she goes, are you drunk? And I go, yep. And she goes, get out. And I told her, I was like, F you, I'm not leaving. And I turn around and walk in, and I go and I lay down on the bed in our bedroom and pass out. From the time that I passed out to the time that her and my mom were waking me up, I have no idea how long it was, but she had called my parents. My dad took the kids to their house, all the kids to their house, and my mom and her were trying to get me out of the bed and get me into the car. She was kicking me out again. And I was refusing to leave, and my mom's pleading with me like, this isn't going to get better unless you get help. This isn't going to, you're going to have to leave for a time. She's not saying she wants to divorce you, but you need to get out of the house. We need to get you help. And I was like, finally they talked me into it, and her and my mom, again, with their help, because I couldn't get down the stairs on my own, they were helping me down the stairs. We get into the car. And as we're driving away, my mom realizes she doesn't have any of my IDs, which, we would need for hospital and care and all that stuff. So she turns around and goes back and calls Jonna, my second wife at the time, calls her and says, hey, he needs his IDs. So she gives the IDs to her brother. Her brother comes down to give the IDs to my mom. And soon as the vehicle stops, I don't know, I already was dealing with in my drunken stupor of thoughts of my life is over. She's going to divorce me, another divorce, my second divorce. This is going to be, everything's done. I have no prospects for career. I had a career that was, a great career, and I gave it all away, and I have nothing left. I'm causing my family stress, hurting my mom, hurting my dad. I'm hurting my wife, hurting my children, because now, I could potentially be a liability to my children because I've been drinking while I'm supposed to be watching them, and they could have gotten hurt, especially my youngest at the time, barely like a year old. And, I'm drunk. And so I'm like, it would just be better. I would stop hurting if I did this, and they wouldn't have to deal with my crap. Right. So there's this misnomer, misconception from people who have never dealt with suicidal ideation and the attempt or attempting suicide, for that matter, people who have never dealt with it see it as this selfish act. They see it as this act of utter and unadulterated selfishness, that you're not thinking of anybody else when you're going through this. And I can speak from my experience that that is not, absolutely not the case. The predominant thought in my mind, more so than how it would benefit me, was that I would not be a burden to them anymore. I would not screw my kids up any more than I already have. I would not hurt I wouldn't be able to hurt my parents continuously. Yeah, they would be hurt for a moment, but it wouldn't be a continuous kind of pain for the rest of their lives. You know, they'd get over it. That's the thought that was in my head. And then John,
in a situation like that, you're basically thinking of others instead of yourself. And if you take yourself out of the picture, they'll be better off.
Yeah, they'll be able to find a new person. Like, she'll be able to find a new person who's better for her. The kids will be able to have a stepdad who's better for them, or whatever. And so that was my main crux of my of actually convincing myself to do it. And it was, and the secondary to that was, in addition, like a bonus to it, I get to stop hurting too. So win-win for everybody is the way I looked at it. I wasn't looking at it as just a selfish thing. And so it's, to me, it wasn't a selfish act. I'm the cause of all these problems. If I eliminate me, the cause of all these problems go away.
Yeah, but what people don't realize, that committing suicide is, it literally is. It's still a suicide bomb.
Yeah,
because
it still does. Yeah,
you might kill somebody with that suicide bomb, like, that's really close to you, but it still affects other people. You could have a person that you haven't met in a while, they hear about it and something happens. It's like a piece of shrapnel that's in
absolutely,
actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the best thing that I'd ever heard that sums up what suicide does is that it doesn't stop the pain, it transfers it to people that you left behind.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. But in that moment, right? In that moment, that, obviously I'm not thinking logically, right? Because logic has long since left the building at that point. I am not in a, stable mental state, right? So, argumentation back and forth as to what's plus and what's minus, cons and pros and all that stuff isn't happening. All I see is I'm hurting everybody. I'm hurting myself. I may as well just end it. And so I get out of the vehicle. I jump as it comes to a stop. I leap out of the door, open the door, swing it wide open, run down this field where I knew there was a creek. And this tells you how drunk I was. I was so drunk, I thought I could drown myself. And so I went down, I went down to the creek, and I went face first. I didn't even try to catch myself. I, like that kid that I threw into the street, I went straight face first, put my arms behind me, and went right into the creek. And I tried to breathe in the water. Like, I was trying to breathe in the water.
That just reminds me of that whole part in Robin Hood Men in Tights, where Big John's in the creek. He's like, save me.
Stand up.
And honestly, it's about that deep. It's about that. The creek had not been rained in a while, so it was about that.
Wow.
Deep.
Yeah. Okay.
But my face is in the water, in the mud, and I'm trying to breathe it in. And my brother-in-law had chased me down the creek, and as I'm trying to breathe the water in, he reaches in and he grabs me and pulls me out. And I'm trying to fight him. Now I had taught him, I think a few months earlier, or maybe a year or so earlier, I'm not sure, but I had taught him some moves because I was an instructor for my department when it comes to ground defense recovery, which is basically MMA for police. Instead of finishing the fight with breaking arms and killing people, it's subdue and restrain.
Jiu-jitsu and grappling and all that.
Yeah, it's grappling without the final move, basically. And so I was an instructor for that, whereas in MMA, they're all about, if it's a street fight, kill, stuff like that. That a lot of the moves
they're still trained to. It's different. My training, they're still trained to subdue. On the other hand, I'm not trained.
When I was first introduced to MMA was when I was in the Army and we were taught combatives, and so it was kill. And then when I became a police officer, I had to change my tactics when we were learning GDR, ground defense recovery is what we called it, but it was based on the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for law enforcement. It was based on their program. And so it wasn't about kill, it was about restrain and subdue, or subdue and restrain. So I had taught him some things, which turned around in this moment. He actually used those things that I taught him to protect himself while I was trying to fight him. Of course, I'm drunk, so I don't really have a whole lot of, I have my knowledge, but I'm, not able to control my faculties as well as I normally would be. So he was able to fight me. But we fought for a good 20 minutes. And anybody who's done MMA knows that fighting for 2 to 3 minutes is tough. So I fully, looking back on it, I fully believe, because he was drunk too. He'd already had a 6-pack by the time we're fighting, at the in this field. So I fully believe that he was given supernatural strength. I believe God sent the angels down and gave him the strength to be able to endure, because I was trying to hurt him. I was trying to headbutt him. I was trying to punch him. I was trying to gouge eyes. I was trying to do anything I could to get free of him so I could get back to the creek. But he was able to maintain. He got a little hurt, but for all intents and purposes, it was bumps and bruises that otherwise, he probably should have, experienced more than that. But like I said, I fully believe that he was given supernatural strength to subdue me, because he did that by himself for 20 minutes. It took 2 police officers and 3 paramedics to get me subdued, handcuffed, and on a backboard.
Jesus.
And he did that by himself for 20 minutes. And he was not in the best shape of his life at all by any means. So that's why I fully believe that God definitely gave him an extra, portion of strength that day.
Yeah.
And but they got me on the backboard. They got me up into the ambulance. That's where I lost my Apple Watch. That's why I have a Fitbit. It's in the charger, but I have a Fitbit now because I can't afford to replace my Apple Watch. But which is funny. But
first world problems.
First world problems, right? So I ended up going to JPS in Fort Worth, and I ended up so it's ironic, I guess, because I had sent many people to the psych ward, being a police officer in California and Georgia, and then in Dallas. I came across a lot of people with mental health issues, and I'd done a lot of involuntary committals. Here I am, having 18 plus years of law enforcement experience, and I'm being involuntarily committed, and the police officers did take pity on me. They decided not to charge me once they found out that I was a veteran in crisis, because they were veterans too. And so they took pity on me and decided just to involuntarily commit me and defer the charges. So that was a blessing in and of itself. But I'm sitting there in JPS in the basically the psych triage, right? So bunch of people, all with mental health issues in one big room is what it is. And so I find myself, I'm, kind of just in a chair, just kind of off by myself, trying to just not get involved with anybody at that point. And a recliner comes open, I snake it, get in there, I claim it. And so I never leave that chair for like 3 days, unless I'm going to the restroom. But then I get moved over to the actual psych ward at Trinity Springs for a 5-day evaluation. And while I'm there, I'm just like lost. Like my head is not in it. I don't know what's going on. I'm just, how did I get here? That sort of thing. And I remember sitting in the day room one day where something's on TV, and I'm just kind of sitting there blankly staring at the TV. And this gentleman comes over. His name is Michael. And he goes, "Hey, I just wanted to come over and introduce myself." He's one of the patients. I want to come over and introduce myself. And he said, "My name is Michael." I'm like, "Hey, man, I'm Bryan." He's like, how you doing? And so we just started talking. And I told him a little bit of my story, and he told me a little bit of his story. And he asked me, he's like, "Have you ever heard of," because I told him about how AA wasn't working for me and stuff. He's like, "Have you ever heard of Celebrate Recovery?" Like, Celebrate, yeah, I've seen signs. I don't know what it is, but I've seen signs around town for it. He goes, "Well, it's a Christ-centered 12-step recovery group." I was like, "Oh, that's neat." And that's about it. It's just, that's neat. That's cool. It's a novel concept to make it a 12-step group about, where it's God and Jesus. That's cool. Didn't think much of it at the time. Just thought it was just a passing conversation. After I was there for a few days, I ended up getting discharged without, seeing the judge. The staff and the doctors thought I was well enough to that it was just a momentary thing. So they sent me home, and I was working with a lady named Tina Marie from American Addiction Centers at the time, and she was able to help me work through the veterans program that they have at American Addiction Centers to get the VA to send me to Greenhouse in Grand Prairie, Texas for rehab.
Okay.
And the reason I was able to do that is my particular situation, having been a cop for the VA, we were able to make the case that I needed to go to community care instead of the VA's program, because chances are the people that I would come in contact with in the program were people that I've either arrested or sent to the psych ward at some point or another. And so it might be a distraction for them. It definitely would be a distraction for me, because I'd be watching my back the whole time. It's like a cop going to prison, you know.
I worked in prison. It's okay.
Sure. Yeah. So they understood that, and they agreed that it would be best for both the veterans who are in the program there, and best for me to not have to worry about that. And Greenhouse had a veteran program, but and so I ended up going there. And it's funny, I went there on a Saturday. I think it was like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I get in processed and sent to my room, and I spent the rest of the day just in my room. I would go get food and then come back to my room and eat in my room, even though we weren't technically supposed to. They didn't, but I was in the detox wing, so they didn't really mess with you too much as far as the rules go. They just kind of let you do your thing, you know, in the detox wing, just so that you can get that stuff out of your system. And so the next day was Sunday, and the very first person, like the therapist, you know, to kind of do my orientation, who came in, just happened to also be, and I say happened with quotation marks, just happened to also be the guy who ran the Christian small group for Greenhouse rehab. And so we started talking, you know, and I started, you know, and he asked me if I, you know, was a believer, and I said yes. And you know, I told him I accepted Jesus as, you know, when I was 7, but my entire life, my entire adult life, I was basically living like I wasn't a Christian. You know, went through all the details of all the sin and sexual immorality, and, you know, anger and violence and alcoholism and all the different things I had done. And he said, well, you know, why did you leave the church? And I asked him, I told him, I was like, well, because it's full of, you know, two-faced individuals that just, you know, say one thing to your face and talk crap behind your back, and they themselves are out there during the week just doing whatever they want, just so they can come in on Sunday so they can take a shower, and then they go back out and get dirty again. I mean, I don't want to be a part of that. And he's like, well, he actually, and this is something that really got me thinking. He's like, well, if you see that and you're on the outside, and you saw that when you were in, how does the church get better if people who see what's going on aren't in the church to make it better, or to call it out when they see it, or to do better and to live better and by example? And that really kind of hit me in the gut. It's like I'm being just as much of a hypocrite as the people I was angry with. I'm being the exact same person. I'm just not going to church to do it, but I'm still the same hypocrite.
Yeah.
And so that really got me thinking. And then throughout, I was there at the inpatient facility for 60 days. And so I slowly but surely, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to come back into my faith and, you know, come back into being a practicing Christian. But I really felt, you know, the doctor I ended up having for the veterans group, that she was in charge, her name is MJ. Marion Jackson is, you know, she was our therapist for specifically for the veterans and first responders. It's a mixture of veterans and first responders that they have for that group. And having been both, I was a perfect candidate. So she also was a very strong Christian, but she would tailor her therapy based on you. Like if you were not a believer, then it was all, you know, psychology. But if you were a believer and you wanted that to be put into your therapy, then she would be more than happy to incorporate that. So I started talking to her about God, about faith. And so she started praying with me, and we started going over scripture and different things, as well as she wanted me to do this therapy called EMDR, which, for those who are unfamiliar, EMDR stands for, what was it? EMDR. Eye movement, desensitization, and rehabilitation. So eye movement, eye movement, desensitization, rehabilitation. And what it is it's almost like a meditative therapy. Okay. So different ways, but you're sitting there, there's different ways to do it. You can do it through sound and pictures on a screen, in a reclined and relaxed environment, where, you're kind of being walked through some of these memories, these traumatic memories, and you're remembering details because it's in a calm environment and you're safe and in control, because the person that's with you has built that trust with you, that now you can revisit these memories and you can experience the emotions and know that you're safe to experience those things. And so,
okay, that explains how DMT works then.
Yeah, kind of like that. But
because a lot of people that, yeah, a lot of people that I know, they get over their addiction and PTSD through DMT or hallucinogenics, and
it's
that's
very similar,
and it actually works. That's the great thing about it. But what you're actually describing is everything, but without the drugs.
Right, and there's actually research being done into psychotropics as a medicine for PTSD of all types, not just military and first responder, but all PTSD types.
Yeah, because what a lot of people don't know is that PTSD isn't that most people associate with military as shell shock, and it's been named different. But the most people that actually have PTSD, vehicle accidents,
child abuse, rape,
your
911 dispatchers. It's funny. A lot of people don't realize this, but 911 dispatchers have a lot of PTSD, because you got to imagine, and people wouldn't think about that because these people are in a computer, they have a phone, they're not seeing.
They think they're disassociated with that.
Yeah, they feel the general public would look at them and say, well, they're not part of they're separated from the incident. They're not seeing the bodies, they're not seeing the carnage and all that stuff. But what they don't realize, and the way I came to realize this was my first wife before we got divorced. She was in a career field where she would hear those things on the intel side. But she was safe stateside, but she would hear it over in country, because she was in the intel field. And so she would hear people getting blown up and getting hurt and stuff like that. And so she would have her own PTSD from that, not being able to do anything. And so the same thing with 911 dispatchers is that they see all these deaths, or not see them, but they hear these deaths, they hear these people dying and getting beaten and getting hurt. And they are experiencing PTSD because there's nothing they can do except talk. And then when the person doesn't make it, or when the person, continues to suffer, they deal with that. So PTSD comes in all shapes and sizes, in many different forms. Car accidents is definitely, one of them, and any number of other things. And so, but while I was in this treatment and we were doing this EMDR, I was able to revisit those traumatic memories, and specifically like the dead bodies, the 5 dead bodies. It was, it was there. It was just kind of like an added addition to my guilt that I had for Ritzburg, my survivor's guilt that I had for Ritzburg.
Okay.
It was just kind of, it would feed into the negative thoughts. It would feed into the negative energy coming into my mind.
It was basically your mind attaching that traumatic to another traumatic thing.
Right. And it was just compounding it. Right. So, but we started to do the EMDR treatment, and anybody who has PTSD, I highly recommend EMDR, Echo, Mike, Delta, Romeo. Because it does make a difference. It makes a huge difference being able to revisit those memories, as painful as they are, because you start to see details of that time frame and the surrounding time frame that you didn't see before, that maybe you forgot or maybe you blocked out. That's what I kind of alluded to earlier in the talk, was that I forgot that I had gone to my platoon sergeant and begged for him not to transfer Ritzburg out of my squad. I fought to keep Ritzburg but I forgot that I had done that. And so a lot of the guilt that I was carrying was that I didn't fight for him, and that I didn't try to keep him in my squad, and that I let him down, and I didn't train him properly, and all these different things. And so when we were going through the EMDR, and I remembered that I had gone to my platoon sergeant and argued with him almost to the point of insubordination that Richburg needed to stay in the squad. And then as far as the training, that maybe I didn't train him well enough because he was part of my squad when we were training. Look, we were able to revisit training scenarios and revisit some of the FTXs that we had been on. And we were able to revisit how he had progressed from a problem soldier into one that was doing very well in his training and was becoming the soldier that he needed to become. And so a lot of that was starting to come to the surface as far as I didn't have to carry that guilt as much.
Yeah, because you realize that you actually done as much as you possibly can.
I possibly could have, yeah.
And it was just the fate.
It was just the suck. It was just
Yeah.
the suck. Yeah. And so and during that time, I'm starting to visit the Christian small group, a couple of times a week. It was on for like, I think 4 or 5 days a week. It was like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We had to do a small group every evening. And so during the days, it wasn't, they weren't doing that. I was doing, I don't know, yoga or, whatever else was going on. But it got to a point where whenever Christian small group was going on, I was going to it because I was finding help. I was finding peace in the scriptures. I was finding understanding, and I was releasing a lot of shame and releasing a lot of guilt because I was also carrying shame and guilt for the way I had acted for the past, 26 years, from that adulthood, from the time that
a lot of the AA or whatever thing you try to get out of your addiction, they have you go out and deal with other people, apologize.
You're making your amends. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing is that, so I started to look at that and be like, for all these years, I've been carrying guilt I didn't need to be carrying, because I refused to get the help that I wanted. So I came up with this thought in my head, and I shared it with my doctor, with Marion, and said, what I've realized during this time, my stay here, is that trauma doesn't care. Trauma doesn't care how much or how little you experience. Trauma is trauma, and trauma needs to be addressed, whether it's a large amount or whether it's a little amount, by your own, cognition, by your own thinking. If you think I've only experienced this much trauma, so I don't need help, that's the lie from the devil himself, saying, trying to keep you, like, that's your mind, saying you're not worthy, right? I'm not saying necessarily it's always from the devil. Like, we also have our own flesh that we contend with, and our own mind and our own psyche that we contend with as well.
Yeah.
From my estimation. And so you have these two things that you struggle with, and I had to realize that it didn't matter. Like, yes, there's guys who have seen, infinite more amount of evil and trauma and carnage than I've ever seen. But that doesn't mean that my trauma doesn't need to be addressed.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people forget.
Right.
Like I said, put the mask on yourself first.
Right. And so that was the thing, is that I realized that it was okay. That even though, if I were to compare myself to some of the guys who got the Medal of Honor, right, and the things that they had to go through and the things that they experienced, because you don't get the Medal of Honor for showing up, for coffee. If I compare myself to them, then yeah, the stuff I experienced doesn't seem to necessarily carry the same weight, but it still carries weight, and it still needs to be addressed regardless of the intensity of it. And so once I was able to accept that I needed to stop comparing my trauma to other people's trauma, and I just needed to address my trauma so that I could live a more full life.
Yeah.
I was then able to stop trying to be that tough guy, and stop trying to be so strong I was weakening myself. It's like, you're holding you're holding your muscles so tight that they just become fatigued. And I had to let go, and I had to release so that my muscles could relax, so that they could build back up. If you constantly, are lifting weights every single day and not giving your body rest, you're going to constantly be destroying yourself and wearing yourself down, and you'll never get a chance to recover. And that's kind of what I was doing with my trauma, was I was constantly fighting, constantly working against my trauma, trying to keep it stuffed down. And I was never, the muscles of my psyche were never able to relax and recover and become stronger, having been through it.
Yeah,
And
even when I was doing my martial arts training at the time, they were like, okay, you're going through this, you're doing 6 days a week on this day.
Yeah.
Don't work out, relax, let your muscles
drink water.
heal up. Yeah, drink water, get into hot bath, cold bath, whatever you choose, and soak up all that healing.
Oh
And,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So at the end of the 60 days, we had done the EMDR, and I was still nervous about going back out, like leaving, because I'm in a safe environment. I've got my structure again, like I did in the military. I've got food, I've got shelter. I'm safe. I'm not near alcohol. I'm not near the old temptations and all that stuff. I'm in a good place. I'm feeling lighter than I have in decades. Happier than I've been than since I could remember from, being a child. I told that to my doctor. I was like, I'm nervous about leaving. I don't think I'm ready to go back out into the world. And she's like, well, I agree, because we've just gone through EMDR, and there are side effects that can potentially come up, and you need to be in a safe environment for a while, after that, or at least have somewhere safe that you can be after that, so that if any of the other trauma starts to rear its ugly head, you're not out there flapping in the wind. And
Basically
so
doing what that one scene in that one John Wayne movie where he just tosses the kid into the pool or pond.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and that's what they don't want to do. That's why she said that's why we had to get an extension from the VA for an additional 30 days, because I was only initially approved for 30 days. So they had to get an extension for an additional 30 days so that we could do the EMDR. And then at the end of that, they were like, we still think you need to be in a structured environment. So what they have their outpatient program. Well, their outpatient program, you can either do it from home and you drive into the outpatient facility and go to the therapy, or they have what's called hotel resolutions, which was an old, I think, Marriott at one point over there off of I-30 between Grand Prairie and Arlington, here in Dallas-Fort Worth. So it's an old hotel that they've retrofitted. It's structured. You have, if you want to leave to go get groceries or go to other things, or you have to get a pass. But it's a place. It's like $1,200. It's like $1,250 a month. Right. And you get a bed, you get cable, you get Wi-Fi, you get food, and you have showers. And so most people share a room with somebody else, but occasionally they have single rooms for people like with me, like with PTSD, that they'll give a single room to that are having difficulties with their sleep still, so that they're not disturbing their neighbor, and they're not there's a concern of danger, depending on what you might do in your sleep if you have a PTSD episode. So having been through the EMDR, they decided that I was going to go into one of those rooms. Well, we tried to get the VA to cover it, but the problem was that the outpatient facility and the inpatient facility, though they're both part of American Addiction Centers, they're two different corporations as far as the VA contracting goes.
Okay, yeah.
So they couldn't use the same contracting number from the inpatient facility for the outpatient facility. And the VA was saying they wanted me to go to the outpatient treatment that the VA offered, and they weren't going to pay for the outpatient at Greenhouse. Well, over the course of 60 days, I had grown to trust American Addiction Centers. I had grown to trust Greenhouse as an entity, as an organization. And I still had mistrust with the VA because I'd been a cop for them, and I'd seen how some of those guys get treated when they go to therapy and stuff. And I was not comfortable going into the VA for help at that point.
I just think you've seen a lot of bad experience. Nothing like that actually happens.
Yeah, that's what they say. But so in their charity, Greenhouse, the CEO actually put me in for a scholarship for the outpatient portion for the actual treatment.
Oh, okay.
So they actually covered my bill for 30 days of outpatient at the therapy. I still had to come up with $1,250 for rent at the hotel though. And at the time I really didn't have the money for it. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to get this money. I'm talking to my parents. But what's funny is my mom's at work. She's a certified occupational therapist assistant. She's been doing that for like 30, 40 years or something. So, but she's at work and she's talking to one of her friends about the things I'm going through. She's, kind of having somebody that she can lean on, kind of a shoulder that she can lean on.
Yeah.
And so she's telling this lady about it. And she didn't know this at the time, but the lady had received an inheritance from her father passing. But she wasn't using the inheritance for herself. She was using the inheritance for causes that she felt that she believed in and that she wanted to support.
Snap.
So she was giving to charities and different organizations. And when she heard my story, she offered to pay for my stay at the Hotel Resolutions. And so she covered my entire stay at Hotel Resolutions from the inheritance. And so again, I'm seeing God's providence at this point saying, yes, I agree. You need to be here. You need to be in this situation. You need to continue your therapy. Because I was praying to God. I was like, God, if this is what you want, make a way happen. Because I don't see a way. I don't see how this is going to happen. I don't have the money for it. I don't have the ability to do it. And in both ways, both the therapy and the residency, he covered without me having to pay a dime.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I mean, it's just, again, and I had seen confirmation throughout the first 60 days, and this is just more confirmation that I'm on the right track, that this is what God is wanting, that he's blessing it and he is making it happen without me having to do a whole lot at all, except just obey, just follow his lead, and he'll get me through this. So while I was in that 60 days at the inpatient, I kept hearing about CR over and over again. And I started thinking about it. I was like, maybe I should try it out, because they kept talking about Celebrate Recovery as one of the options when you get out. And I remember Michael, and it dawned on me, I was like, I wonder if it's a coincidence that the guy who came up to me and introduced himself as Michael told me about CR and the archangel in the Bible was named Michael. Just it was a random thought, but I was like, was that Michael the archangel, that he wasn't really there for anything except me? I mean, I don't know, but I know that's kind of silly, but the thought entered my mind. But I knew that I needed to go to CR, and so while I was in the outpatient, you have a couple of weeks a few days where you kind of get oriented, and they determine whether or not you're in a good place to be able to leave on passes. Well, I was able to get permission to start leaving on passes because I wanted to go to Celebrate Recovery instead of AA. And there was a Celebrate Recovery down the road through Central Bible Church. Central Bible Church is a non-denominational church over here in Fort Worth, on the border of Fort Worth and Arlington, on East Chase and I-30. And every Thursday from 6:30 to 9, they have Celebrate Recovery. And so I was able to get a pass. And one of the guys, another guy named Bryan, but he spelled it with an I. So, there's that.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I would get passes. And every Thursday I had my Jeep because I lived in the area. He was from up north. And we would just get in my Jeep and we would drive out there. And the first day that I went in to Celebrate Recovery, it felt good. Like it felt like home. Like I felt like this is what I should have done this sooner. Like AA wasn't working for me because a generic higher power, even if I named my high power Jesus in AA, the camaraderie within the AA community for me, it was, I may have a sponsor who doesn't believe in Jesus, who doesn't believe, because some of the things that they would talk about in some of the AA meetings I went to was like, you can make this coffee cup your higher power. You can make that doorknob anything can be your higher power. It doesn't have to be God, for the atheists in the group and stuff. And I was just like, that doesn't make sense to me. If I'm going to believe in a higher power, I'm not going to believe in something I can, like a light bulb, I can switch on and off. I want a higher power that's actually a higher power that I don't control. And so, when I went to Celebrate Recovery and listened to I think that night it was a testimony night. So there is some similarity between CR and AA. They have a testimony night and they have a lesson night. And so it goes back and forth and stuff. But we started off with worship. So we had worship songs, we're singing, I'm showing up brand new, don't know anybody there. And everybody's welcoming me and my friend Bryan as though we're old friends coming home from that they hadn't seen in a long time. Like they didn't pry, they didn't ask. They're just like, hey man, welcome, we're glad you're here, hugging and handshaking and just genuinely glad to see people there. And I was like, I had never experienced that within church culture, You know, yes, there were people who were glad to see us when we went to church, but it wasn't so overwhelmingly everybody, just everybody coming up out of the woodwork to welcome people in. And so I was like, this is awesome. And so we had what's called Newcomers 101, which is where your first meeting, you sit down with some of the leaders in the Celebrate Recovery, and they kind of tell you what the structure's like, what we do, and all that stuff. And so it starts off with worship, then we have testimony, or we have a lesson. Then you can pick a small group, whether it's life issues, you know, stuff like life issues be like codependency, sexual addiction, things like that. You have addictions of all kind. That's another group, is addictions. So sexual addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever addictions you're facing, there's a group for that. And then at our group, we have a welcome home section, where the welcome home is specifically geared towards veterans. And that group covers everything from life issues to addictions to whatever it is. It's because it's for veterans, you know, veterans only, that they come in. And so whatever you're dealing with, whether it's marriage issues, whether it's gambling, whether it's, you know, lust or pornography, you know, or alcohol or drugs, all of it is welcome in that group, because we're veterans helping veterans. And it's, you know, it's great. And I've just continued down that path. I ended up doing my 12 steps. I had everybody in AA was always like, do your 12 steps, do your 12 steps. I just never had the desire or motivation. I didn't want a sponsor from them. I didn't want anything from them. But when I got to CR, I wanted it. You know, I met a guy there. He became my first sponsor. He too, veteran and law enforcement. And that's why I wanted him as my sponsor, because he could speak to the same experiences that I could. And
Yeah.
he was very, very instrumental in getting me going and getting me started. He invited me to an AA group on Tuesdays that he went to for first responders out at Fort Behavioral over in Fort Worth. And it's on Tuesdays at 6:30. First responders, retirees, or active show up, and you know, it's kind of like, it started off as an AA group, but then my sponsor and I and the guy who runs it kind of talked about it, and we're like, well, what if we were to change that into more of a CR type structure, where it can be anything, not just cops dealing with alcohol, but cops, you know, and first responders dealing with alcohol, drugs, porn addiction, you know, marital issues, gambling, whatever they're experiencing, they have a place that they can go and we can talk about it. So it's loosely structured on CR. It's not quite the same, because it's not a Christ-centered group necessarily. It's a higher power AA type group, but it's welcoming more than just alcoholism within the first responder community. So we started doing that. And I found the more I did, the more I helped, the more I served, the more invested I got, and the more at peace I got. And having dealt with a lot of the things that you know, through therapy, that I needed to, and finding my strength in my faith, and finding my strength in Jesus again, and realizing that I didn't have to be that guy anymore. The guy that I was for like the past couple of decades, I don't have to carry him with me. I can just leave him in the past. I can make my amends. I can make my apologies. Whether they accept it or not, it's not on me, but I can attempt, right, and do all these things. And I can turn my life, you know, by the grace of God and through his power, I can turn it into something that I always felt like it should be, and that's glorifying him. Because I used to use scripture when I was in the height of my depravity. I would twist scripture to justify my actions, because I knew it well enough. You know, the devil knows the scriptures. I knew it well enough to twist it to justify what I was doing and make it seem right when it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so now I wanted to actually espouse what I believed, not twist it so that it conformed to my actions, but conform my actions to the scriptures and to what I actually believed. And ever since I started, it's been tough. You know, I've had some slips over this past year, because it's been about a little over a year since I started going to CR. Had a couple of slip ups, you know, with different things, you know, wrong thinking and, you know, different situations. But every time, you know, I come back, you know, and I expose it, and I talk about it with my small group, and I talk about it with my sponsor. With my old sponsor left, and so I have a new sponsor now, and he helped me work through the 12 steps. And it's just, then there's never frustration. At least not from what I've experienced. Every time that I stumbled or slipped, and anytime I've seen anybody else stumble or slip, sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous, you might get that sponsor who's a little more tough, or a group that's a little more tough, and like start to get frustrated with your slipping. Not once have I seen them act that way. I'm just glad you're back. I'm glad you're here. What do we need to do? Let's move forward. Let's put it behind us. And there's so much grace in this group. Like, it reminds me when I read about how the apostles in the New Testament talk about what the church is supposed to be. CR, at least my experience with CR, is that this is the way the church is supposed to be. No judging, in the sense that if you're actively trying to, fend off these demons, or these traumas, or these experiences, they're not going to look down on you, and they're going to welcome you every single time, no matter how many times it takes. And it's just been a blessing, and I can't speak highly enough of it. I speak about it on my YouTube channel often. But I realized that day, July 9th, 2021, was the day that I tried to commit suicide. And that day I needed to be there. I needed to be in that moment. I needed to be so broken, so beaten down, and so just completely decimated, so that I'd allow God back in to build me back up. Just like Johnny was talking about earlier, the breakdown to build up. He had tried to warn me over the years numerous times. I kept feeling him numerous times. You're not doing this. This isn't good. You're going to get hurt. It's going to cause more pain, more problems. And I ignored. So he finally said, all right, here it is. You're going to break yourself down to the point where you have no other choice but to come to me or die. And he prevented the death so that, I would be broken to the point where I would come back to him. And it's been amazing. Like, I'm not living high on the hog by any means. I was blessed enough that the VA did give me disability, and a rating. And so I am covered medically and stuff, and I do get some income from them. And I have resources now that I can get into a second career through voc rehab and stuff. And so I can start building my life back at 39 years old. From complete, decimation, where looking at from the outside, I was on track to having a beautiful, perfect life, to complete nothingness. And now I'm in that build back, mode.
Yeah, I'm about to I'm about to turn 45 this weekend. I'm on my third marriage.
Yeah.
I feel like I finally got it right.
Yeah. And that's
I'm
another
44,
thing.
so it trust me, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes
Sure.
you get off, sometimes you gotta get back on. You forgot you're at,
Well, and what's neat too, right, is as I obeyed, and as I submitted to the convictions that I was being given, and as I started serving more, I was given an opportunity to become a leader in CR. And so I'm part of the leadership. One of the oftentimes I'll be like a co-leader for Welcome Home, and but that's where we met at the outreach there at the Vet Fest. I'm there with a couple of the other leaders for the group, and it's just the more they talk about, like, if you want to keep what you have to give it away. AA talks about that all the time. Like, serving is one of the most vital things, whether it's in AA, whether it's in there's like Buddhist Alcoholics Anonymous, there's secular, recovery programs, there's Celebrate Recovery. There's tons of different recovery programs out there, but every single one of them will tell you, service, do something, serve something.
There's a reason for that. AA, the development of AA was the original thing was two guys. They're alcoholics. They couldn't stop. They tried everything to stop. They tried what it ended up happening is like, hey, let's try to help each other out. You call me if you want to go get a drink, and I'll call you if I want to go get a drink. And that's the basis and the growth of that organization. It's what a lot of people don't understand is like, oh, I can live by myself, and then that's getting the attitude nowadays, because
Isolation is the worst thing you can do if you're an addict.
Yes, no, isolation is the worst thing you can do as a human being. We're social creatures. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it.
And that's part of that service, because when you serve, you're with people.
Yeah.
If you serve within AA, or you serve within Celebrate Recovery, or any of the other groups that are out there, when you serve within them, you're with people who have been through the road, been down the road you're going through or haven't been through. And when you have those demons start to try to rise back up inside you, they're coming alongside you, and you have backup, right? You have your reinforcement on hand.
And it's also the community. The basis on that too is comfortability. Comfortability.
Mm-hmm.
When you go up to a group of people, like I do comedy on Mondays, and I'll talk to certain people, but a lot one of them actually came by and is like, "Hey, dude, you talk to everybody, but you end up just hanging out by yourself." I was like, "Y'all don't talk like me. Y'all are comedians, yeah. Y'all are pretty funny, but y'all don't talk like me."
Yeah.
He's like, "What do you mean by that?" I have offended each and every one of those comics because they don't understand
Right.
the remnants.
The gallows humor.
Yes, and
Sure.
it's to the point to where I was like, me and Johnny, the way we got together, it was not by chance. I reached out to talk about what was it,
Base Camp Lindsay.
Base Camp Lindsay. It's this organization. I don't even still think I know the organization is still alive and well here, but they still haven't completed their mission.
No.
And I got with him because what's her God? If she hears this, she's gonna Marissa, yeah. And it was just one of those chances. I saw her doing this charity. I asked I asked my father-in-law. I asked my father, and I asked my brother-in-law, and they're like, "Yeah, we went to a charity dinner to do that." I was like, "Okay, I guess it's a real charity." So I asked him. He came along because she was scared because she's a woman, and we won't get into all that.
But yeah.
But I ended up meeting him. He's a host now. We're close friends, and he knows I can count on him, and he knows I can.
Right.
He knows
I mean, to put it in perspective, the the first time that I came back to film with him after we did the interview about Base Camp Lindsay, we talked for 4.5 hours. He split it up into 3 episodes, and it has taken off from there. And it's like, and now we've got Chris Jacka, who sometimes, well, more times than not now, he'll co-host with our sports show that we film on Tuesday nights. And
they beat up on me.
You want to
put it out there. They beat up on me.
You want to talk about putting David out in the middle of nowhere.
Just taking it like a champ.
Chris Jacka was an infantryman just like I was.
Actually, you met him.
So
the guy that was the BRCC fund.
BRCC.
He's a big guy, big bushy beard, wore Black Rifle Coffee stuff.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Chris. That was the co-host.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
We constantly, and we don't even mean to do it. Sometimes it just happens. Like, just beat up on David, and he takes it like a champ. So I mean,
that's but that's the thing, right? Is that within the veteran community, it's always funny. We'll give each other a hard time, but somebody from the outside, if they're not a veteran and they try to talk crap about the Air Force, we're like, who are you to talk crap about the Air Force when you're not, you didn't even have the gumption to join up yourself, any of them.
I've only done that instance once, and I was like, guys, you were literally threatening to put me in the trash, but now you're willing to kill for me. I'm like, yeah, it's confusing, but let's do this.
Yeah, that's the thing. Right. Is, I mean, Army gives a hard time to Air Force. Marines give a hard time to pretty much everybody. Everybody gives a hard time to the Navy.
It's still a thing. I still don't want to.
Yeah.
I was talking to a Navy guy. He's like, I'm gonna beat you to death. I was like, please don't. I don't want to beat on my headstone that a seaman killed me. He was like,
I mean, David was giving me crap because the Air Force
drowned by
we had
seamen?
their chief trophy this year. You know, so Air Force not only beat Navy, but they beat Army, so they got the CIC trophy, right?
Yep.
And I'm just sitting there going,
"Wow, though."
yeah, we're not going to talk about that, but
Somebody paid somebody
you
off.
know,
No, we're rich, but we're acceptable.
point is, it's like, okay, so we're having a conversation in text messages yesterday because David puts this video in our message thread about this meat glue called Moo Glue, right? It's like a collagen based whatever, right? And we start talking about different ideas, concoctions that we can glue together meat wise and throw into a smoker. And I came up with the whole brisket wrapped goat, right? Throw it in a
Okay.
smoker.
That's only
Sounds
because I
amazing.
said
That
That-
does sound
that-
great.
And then I
Right.
was like, you know, and Chris had said something about, you know, well, as long as Army beats Navy, blah blah blah.
no, that was me.
So here comes David.
Mhm.
Was that you? Because then you followed it up with a gif from the Joker going, and here we go.
Oh no,
You know?
what I said is like we'll probably do it on the day that Navy beats Army. And
Oh,
that's what it was.
that's
I think that's where you got
that's what it was. See, because I refuse. I have situational dyslexia. When I see people put Navy in front of Army, I'm like, my brain doesn't register that.
Mhm.
So, context: my dad was a Navy guy, 20-year
Okay.
Navy man. I grew up a Navy brat. I joined the Army. We don't watch the game together.
to.
I mean, and it's on the bucket list to go see one of these games in person. And my dad said, "Yeah, we can go to the game together, but we're sitting on opposite sides of the stadium." I was like, "Okay, you
I want to
know."
be a fly on the wall in
And
the car that you go back home with.
oh, we don't even talk. It doesn't matter who wins. We have a standing rule that we do not talk about the game
Yeah.
because inevitably somebody is going to get pissed.
Oh no,
And
you
it's
don't
like,
get this, not at all. You don't
oh,
like you don't go on the lines of dissecting it to the point to where you're making a point, but it's irrational. But I still go, okay, yeah, you're right. So just to shut you up. Nothing. You don't do that, dude, at all. I mean, I
yeah.
don't have like a box that you were seriously sauced that my name was called for this box of an axe from Black Rifle Coffee. By the way, that's a $200 axe that I got for free
Nice.
because I won this thing. I mean, he got the coffee and stuff, but nothing. We're wonderfully friends, and we don't do anything harmful to each other. Where's that red dot coming from? But anyways, but that's how we
Send it.
I know. Damn it. But that's I mean, we have the but when it comes around to Johnny has some personal issues in his life with his new wife that they weren't even married. And was I the first person you called after he passed?
Yeah. No. You were one of the first people.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I called my folks. All right. So what we were talking about is
It's not that
my
I wanted
wife.
first or anything on this. It's
No,
just
it's fine.
I was
It's
still
fine. It's fine.
yeah.
So my wife, she had a special needs child. He had several conditions, and she was told that when he was born, he wouldn't live to be, you know, wouldn't live past the age of 2. Well, here it is, Christmas Day last year. I mean, he's not too much further away from turning 11. So, I mean, we're like 8.5 years past the point where she said, you know, hey, look, just be prepared. And he passes away on Christmas morning last year.
Mm.
And I mean, I called my parents, told them what was going on. Um, and then I called David, and I mean, there's a lot. I mean, just like I know that you have on my journey coming from the darkest place to where we are now. I mean, there's been milestones, there's been hurdles, and there has been some definite mountains to climb. And it's about that camaraderie. It's about that esprit de corps,
Mm-hmm.
and and one of the things that I have found with my day-to-day coping is that it's like I can't shut myself off I can't isolate myself. Because like you said, it's the worst thing.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even if you're not, I mean, even if you're just, I mean, even if it's like, okay, I'm not an alcoholic or I'm not addicted to porn or this, that, and the other,
Isolation in general.
yeah, isolation in general is just like all that closet that we keep locked up needs is for somebody to jiggle the handle.
Yep. It's not
and then everybody, yeah, and it's like, they start beating on the door, and it just they don't need to be in the room. They just need to know that you to know that their presence is being felt, and it's having people like sponsors or having people like the coworkers that have the same mindset or have had somewhat same the same experiences. I think that that's vitally important.
For sure.
And to also on the backside of it, just like when we were on active duty, it's like you have to have that support network at home.
Yep.
It's vitally important that you have people in your life that understand,
Mm-hmm.
and that are supportive.
Absolutely.
And and I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for my parents, wasn't for my kids, um, and if it wasn't for my wife, her sister, I really, I don't want to put, I don't like putting a lot of thought into thinking about where I would be
Right.
without them there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely, I can speak to that as well, because if it weren't for my parents and my best friend growing up, my best friend, his name is Eric. We grew up next door to each other when we were kids. He moved in, I think, when I was about, he was either 3 or I was 3. Anyway, we've known each other for over 3 decades. Like, we've been best friends for over 3 decades. Even when I left and went military and stuff, like, we would go years without talking. And as soon as we'd start talking, it's like we, picked up right where we left off. We've always been that kind of friendship. And when I started struggling with my addiction, from the very start, from the very beginning, because he had dealt with his addiction, he had dealt with some addictions of his own, and going to groups and rehab and all that stuff. And so he was there not a veteran, never served in the military, his dad did, came from his brother served, but he also, having been raised by people who were military, and then his brother was military and stuff, he could empathize at least somewhat. But he was there every single time I called, every single time I needed something, and times that I didn't think I needed help, he was still there and providing me the help that I didn't think I needed. But he was still, one, calling, hey, let's go do something. Hey, let's go. I got a soccer game. Come watch. Getting my butt out, keeping me from isolating myself, knowing that was not what needed to happen. And then he he actually married someone, and she, very similar experiences. They both are just an amazing couple. And she's always, she's the kind of wife that, like, plans a lot of things. And she's always sure to her and Eric are both sure to always try to invite me to whatever it is that they're doing. just to make sure I'm not isolating myself, because sometimes, I think, again, speaking for me specifically, I can do it on accident. It's not that I actively seek out to be isolated. I've always been this way. I've never been the planner on things. I've always been the guy that's up for whatever. If you want to do something, let's go do it. If you want to go, skateboard in the middle of the night, let's go. But I'm not the one suggesting it. They're the one suggesting it, and I'm the one grabbing the board and running out the door. they bring it up, and I'm like, let's do it. But I'm never the one suggesting. So I've always been in that side of things. I've always been kind of the follower when it came to going out and doing things. But then when we're doing it, I'm out in front leading the charge.
Yeah. I end up doing that way too much too.
So
yeah, my wife is so much the planner.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. And that's not that's the reason why my second marriage failed. Obviously there's many reasons why my second marriage failed. But that was one of the points of contention in my second marriage, was that I was not someone who planned a whole lot of dates and planned a whole lot of family activities. She did a lot of that stuff. And so that was a lot of burden that she was carrying that was a point of contention at one point or another during the marriage. But yeah, the isolation leads to desolation. That's what it is. If you don't, because if anybody who's out there who's listening to this program, if you're concerned about someone in your life that may be having a problem with PTSD or alcohol or drugs or anything, but you're not sure if they're struggling with it. You're not 100% sure if they're just, being moody or if they're actually struggling with something. Watch them. When they start drinking or when they start partying, do they, are they part of the life of the party, or are they initially part of that, but then they start to drift away? Because that's how I did it. When we would do our parties, before I started drinking every single day, the signs were there that I was isolating myself. And she even would comment on it from time to time, my second ex-wife. We would have parties at the house, and all our friends would come over. It's a great time. Everybody's laughing, having a good time. And I started off that way, but the more I drank, the more I started to distance myself. And I would end up in the garage smoking cigars by myself, drinking alone, while everybody's in the house or in the backyard having a good time. And I would isolate myself. Part of that was my PTSD, large crowds, a lot of noise and stuff like that, because of some of the riots and stuff we dealt with, both on both tours. But and like the large crowds and crowded areas, a lot of stress and stuff that, it wasn't like anything happened in those particular instances as far as like the riots and, crowds and stuff, but you're always like on edge, and you're taught to be on edge and on the lookout, in those moments. And so it was learning how to let go of some of that. I hadn't done that yet. And so when large crowds started to get too much, I would begin to isolate myself. But there was also a warning sign that there's a potential for abuse here, because I'm isolating myself and I'm not, surrounding myself with happiness. I'm going back into my negative space, and I'm going back into my negative feelings and all that. And so if you're seeing that during group events or during social events, someone starts to pull away, that's a sign. It's not the only sign. There's many signs, but that's a sign to kind of keep an eye out for. Not everybody's going to be that way. Some people put on that brave face all the time, and they'll be part of that life of the party. And then it's when everybody's gone that they go into that isolation mode. So, but isolation is definitely one of the key indicators that somebody's struggling with something. You may not know what, but they're struggling with something.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, I do that only because I can't too much sensory stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm about to go out and start a pool, go into a pool tournament. And I stopped going to bars, not because I'm an alcoholic, or they play the music way too loud, and I'm just getting that age where I don't want to listen to it. Like I don't, it bashes my my head. It's like my daughter just recently, she has a lot of problems with overstimulation or just noises in general. She's at that age where she can't figure everything out. But
hold on a second, I got to take a phone call. Hold on.
Okay, go. But it was one of those situations like, why is my ears ringing when I'm crying? I was like, scientifically, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Your crying is actually causing a high blood pressure.
Right.
Your heart's racing, and
Mhm.
that's going in your ear.
Right.
And she's like, oh, wait, oh, I thought it was like something totally different. I was like, no, once you explain
Okay.
something on,
Yeah.
well, once you actually rationally realize something,
Sure.
it's like, oh, I was like, I was talking to a guy because I got an open policy. I'll put these videos out, and I keep constantly telling everybody, it's like, hey, we got a Facebook, we got an Instagram page. I check my comments constantly. I'm on a TikTok. I'm on all these.
Right.
Have a problem, reach out. I've had a couple of people reach out. I had one person reach out, and he was having really bad dreams. He was reliving the instance, and he was like, I don't know why. I was like, okay, well, let's dissect this. Are you in a lot of stress right now? I was like, well, we moved into a new house. Okay. But that's one indication. You have a lot of stress. Another indication is sometimes when you have a lot of stress, I want to say walls because that's the only way we can actually visualize it is just the visualization of a wall that we built up on that situation. You forgot about it, but in all reality, what's happening is your the chemicals in your brain is actually connecting one thing stressed out, and it's connecting to another thing you were stressed out at one point in time, and that's why you're reliving that. You can do the same thing with music if you want to a music that you heard when your first dance with your first love. You can
Mhm.
relive that moment if you remember that song, and you can play that song, and the euphoria and the dopamines, all that stuff. If a person can do it right, I mean, they can get really addicted to that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, I'll listen to this music, and I'll listen to this song constantly. And I've been doing. It's one of those things is you start researching this type of stuff because I've always been interested in my brain after finding out my great grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My dad's has signs of it. My granny is definitely has signs of it, and I wanted to figure out, ways to stop that. And there's a couple of ways that you can stop it that people's put out there, but most of the time it doesn't really work. And this is the same thing I wanted to do with this. Is like Fortress of Solitude with Superman. I'm putting all my stuff in, all the people that can help me out with the situations and knowledge that I get from other people. If my daughter at one day goes, I wonder what my dad means, and she'll go down through which is the big library now
Yeah.
data, and hopefully that will help her out, or it just helps somebody else out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why I do, my own little project is, a lot of it's about, Christianity and a lot of it about faith and stuff, but um, it's a window into me and who I am now, because everybody's seen who I was. Everybody's seen who I became, and the despicable person I became. And I don't want to be that person anymore, and I don't want to leave that legacy for my children. And so while they see a change in me now, and I'm brutally honest with them, they know my struggles. At first I didn't want to tell them about it, but then more I realized, I was like, even though they're young, because my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 4. Obviously my 4-year-old doesn't know a whole lot of anything right now, but the ones in between, they know a lot more about what I've been through than many children probably do about their parents having gone through something like this. And I tell them that because I try to explain to them, remember that guy? Remember that guy in Saginaw that was drinking all the time? Remember that guy that was always angry? Remember that guy that was always yelling? Do I seem like that guy anymore? And they're like, no. And I was like, here's what changed. And I would give them all the things that I've done that I've been blessed with as far as my therapy and as far as my faith and all of that. And here's where I found that peace and that restoration, so that they can see that. But also I do the YouTube thing so that later on, when they're older and they're ready to hear some of the other things that I've worked on and whatnot, even if I'm long gone, even if I'm, if my time has come, they'll still have access to me and be able to watch, me teaching and me learning and growing. Because my channel is not just about me teaching other people, but my channel is about people coming in and engaging in conversation. I want people to come in and comment on things, and we can have discussions, and I want all that stuff there and just be open for everyone to see, because the whole idea behind it was that we grow together, not we don't ever grow when we're by ourselves. We become stagnant when we're isolated. And so reaching out into social media and creating these channels and creating these podcasts and all these things that a lot of us are doing, it's our way of being able to reach out, to anybody out there who might be feeling the same thing or going through the same thing, and letting them know that their story doesn't have to end the way they think it does. That people can come alongside you and want to come alongside you. It's not a burden. It's an honor and a privilege for us to come alongside each other and guide each other through those darkest moments. I mean, when we were in the military, and we were, just think about it, like even for those who have never been to combat, when you were training you're training for whatever, combat exercises that you might be doing in whatever service branch you're in. If you're a part of the backup force and the units out there in the training environment and they're coming under heavy fire and you're called in, are you like, oh crap, now I got to go help these guys out because they can't help themselves? Or you're like, man, let's go, let's roll. Our brothers and sisters are in danger. We're going to roll out. We're going to handle this. And it's the same thing. And that's the thing that where I was that I didn't want to be a burden to anybody, whether it was to my brothers and sisters that are veterans, to my family, to the VA, to anybody, not realizing that they wanted to. It wasn't a burden. It was a passion. It was a desire to be the same reinforcements in a combat situation as it is in an emotional situation. And that, anybody who would look at it as a burden, they're not the ones that are going to respond. The ones that are going to respond and be there for you are the ones that are there because they want to be there and they want to love you through it.
Yeah. Well, we've been this is like a 2 hours and 30-minute mark. Usually when a person wants to talk about themselves, it usually goes this long.
Yeah, I can tend to rant with the best of them. So
that's
you
fine.
and me both, brother.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised Johnny didn't talk as much.
Usually the problem that David and I run into is that we'll start an episode on one topic, and within 15 to 20 minutes we're on the opposite side of the stadium.
I watched one of y'all's shows on what was it? The Watcher.
Oh yeah. The
Yes.
Netflix series. Yeah.
Yeah. I watched that one and I was like, I mean, I think I commented on it because you guys were trying to figure out what it was, but when the cops stacked charges.
Yeah.
And but I was watching it. I was like, yep, he's exactly the way he described it at the Vet Fest. They have a little rant here and there, and they get back on topic eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I may, if we're gonna
you should check out our sports show.
Oh, I will.
That is an guys... I have my 13-year-old come on every week.
Oh my god, the joke was this funny this week.
And it's joke time with Colin. So nice. Yeah, he has his own introduction.
Are they dad jokes?
I know.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, no, I'm going to tell the joke from last week. I'm going to tell the joke.
Yeah, go ahead and tell the joke from last week.
Okay. Husband and wife is watching TV. Husband keeps on switching from golf to porn, golf to porn, golf to porn. The wife gets frustrated. She screams out, "Would you stop changing the channels? Just stick it up on the porn because you already know how to play golf."
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I got one.
These are jokes that my 13-year-old are telling.
Yeah, I got a joke for you. So a cop came up to me the other day and said he was looking for a man with one eye. I said, it'd probably go faster if you use both.
My oldest son is a cop in Amarillo, and I'm going to tell him that.
But if I may, just if you will indulge me
Yeah,
this,
give us give us all the places that we can reach you. Anybody can reach
oh,
you.
well,
Really.
I wasn't going to talk about that, but I will if you'll let me. But I was going to talk more about CR. If anybody's heard about, if they've heard this today and they think that CR, Celebrate Recovery, might be something that they're interested in, there's website. You can go to Celebrate Recovery, just Google it and go, and they'll have a map, like a find CR, and you can put in your zip code or your address, and it'll show you all the CR, the Celebrate Recovery groups in your area with contact information for the person who's leading those groups, and they can give you the times and dates and locations and all that stuff if they've changed and whatnot. One thing I found is that sometimes the website, because it is a charity organization, it's not a for-profit thing, it's self-funded just like AA is. Sometimes the website's not always up to date when it comes to the groups. So if one group doesn't answer, reach out to another, because the groups most of them are still up and running, but some of them, because of COVID, kind of fell to the wayside. Attendance kind of went sideways during COVID. So feel free to reach out through the website and you get plugged into a Celebrate Recovery if you think that that's something that you are interested in. And you don't have to be a Christian to go to Celebrate Recovery. If it's just something you want to check out, anybody and everybody's welcome to come to the group. And yeah, it's definitely different. So it starts off again with worship. So be prepared. In the very beginning, they're going to be singing songs and stuff. But yeah, so please, if anybody thought that was interesting, by all means, there's always room.
And I'll put the link in the description for everybody.
Okay.
I forgot to do that on the video. I got to go back and redo that stuff. But anyways,
and then with my stuff, it's Way Follower Fellowship. I have a YouTube channel. Like I said, it's mostly about Christian theology and doctrine. Right now, I haven't started this new series, but I'm going to start a new series on all the great councils, starting with the Council of Nicaea and moving forward, and talking about what actually happened during these councils, because there's a lot of misinformation about Christianity and Constantine and the New Testament and all that stuff. But it's a lot of that. And then I do like metaphors and parables. I have stuff about early church in the Lord's Prayer, Apostles' Creed, but stuff like that. So if that's interesting, I'm on, Way Follower Fellowship on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. It's all over the place. Okay. So feel free to hit me up there. If you want to email me, it's wayfollowerfellowship@gmail.com. That's my email. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll put all that in there description. But other than that, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and peace.
Later, guys.